Josh Brown, me and you disagree on almost every single video game, so why not talk about PlayStation 5 ones?
No, we don't. We don't disagree on everything. So, where do you
How dare you? Every single thing that we've ever recorded, which is to say that we thought, why not rank all the PlayStation 5 games so far? Now, obviously, if you go down specifically the PlayStation 5 exclusives, there aren't that many of them, and so we are going to be bringing in some cross-gen stuff. There's some stuff that's now available on PC. The point is, we wanted to do a PlayStation 5 ranking, and this is the selection of games that you would expect, so here we go. We have 22 video games in a random order here, and our tiers are S, A, B, C, and D. And right now, we have no idea what each... Well, we kind of have an idea of what each of us think about this. But the first one up is Horizon Forbidden West.
Oh, Scotty T! Scotty T!
I should also say that this will take as long as it takes. The doors are locked. We will leave at some point.
I feel like, it's a pub lock-in, more or less. We're only missing the pints, which I'm going to need after we get to the end of this. Horizon Forbidden West is a game, Scott, that I'd honestly didn't love playing in the moment, but have thought very fondly of ever since it released. I kind of appreciate it more and more as the years go by. So honestly, my gut feeling, it's not S tier, but it is A tier for me.
I'm going to go B for now. I will also say, I should have said this as part of the introduction, that we do have our individual lists, so we're not going to, even though we do have a combined list that we'll reveal at different points along the video, and then we'll reveal it towards the end, because we do need to come to a consensus before this is all finished. We do have our individual lists as well, so even if there's something that Josh loves that I absolutely hate, and I know that's already Returnal, he can put that in a higher tier for the sake of giving that game its flowers, whereas I will just maybe not even bother putting it on. I'll see how I feel as we go, but that's the general format that we're doing. Anyway, for Horizon Forbidden West, I thought this game lost a lot of the core identity that made me love Zero Dawn, as in the story, the general story, pace, how fun the payoffs were towards the end of that game, the mystery of the world itself. I thought a lot of the writing just became so Disney-like and applicable to everyone trying to shoot for the biggest audience possible. I think that's only evidence in the fact that they've now got like 5 Horizon projects in the works. I feel like Forbidden West was the game where they just watered it all down, and it was just, hey, do you want some more Horizon? We don't really know where we're going with this anymore, but here's some more stuff. It was absolutely gorgeous, but I kind of thought it was a bit of a slog. I didn't feel like it pulled off its story details, the impactful stuff, anywhere near as much as Zero Dawn. And so for me, I find it to be very forgettable. But something that might come across as we talk about all this is that I think modern Sony make boring AF sequels. Ooh. And I'll be saying that about God of War Ragnarok when we get there, specifically when it comes to gameplay. But that's why I would say it's more of a B.
See, this is where we're going to start splitting hairs, and when it feels harsh to me to put something in one tier as opposed to the other, because a lot of the criticisms you just mentioned there, like, I am on board with. I do think that it is a criticism of the experience, that it is just more Horizon. I also agree with you that they definitely stretched themselves too thin and bloated the game out when they probably should have been streamlining on the best bits and trying to make them as good as possible. It's a game that just, it is what you expect from a modern sequel that's kind of trying to please everyone. But that said, I do think the quality in there is still incredibly high. I love the open world that is in there. I love how I still think it's one of the best looking games ever made.
It is.
Just visually and from a technical perspective.
Sorry, just one of the many games. I explode with rage there. One of the many games that sparked that horrific debate around eyelashes and pupils and ear cartilage and all the stuff that's killing video games.
Now, there's right at the moment we are recording this, I'm sure this is what you're actually referring to, Scott Telford, but there is a tweet doing the rounds on Twitter that is essentially comparing the different eye models for a bunch of different games and being like, which one's the best, and everyone has been dunking on it. Nah, I think that stuff rules. I think that is really good to have in games, and Horizon is a reflective of that, literally, because you see the reflection in Aloy's eyes.
I hate it.
I think good presentation goes a long way. It can elevate a good game to a great game or a bad game to an all right game. I put a lot of stock in it. I know you don't, but that's why I think that's part of the reason why, anyway, that I would put Horizon in that A tier, because it plays great, it looks great, it's a lush to run around that world, and I think the combat is just as good, if not even more silky smooth than in the first game. It's much bigger, it's much more intense. The story, I still think it's good. It's not amazing, but I like it, and I don't know if I can concede it being B. B just seems really harsh.
I'll concede that it's an A game. If I'm going to go down a more sort of objective, what they're going for, what did they nail kind of route, yes, it's an A tier game. I just found it to be horrifically boring. I do like the thematic towards the end. And we're going to do full spoilers for the majority of these games, especially if they're a couple of or so years old. The whole idea of the internet becoming sentient and coming after all the humans based on the amount of hate and rage that we collectively instill into the internet is a hilariously kind of fun sci-fi concept. And that thing then being able to travel between planets is like ridiculous.
Oh yeah.
I'm kind of there for that. Not the final boss, not the ridiculous way that it all plays out in terms of what you actually play, but the hook that it ends on, that idea of bringing in that sort of philosophical conversational element is what I love so much about Zero Dawn. The whole twist towards the end of that game with Ted Faro deleting humanity's archives and everything. I think that stuff's cool. I'd easily go A tier.
You know what though, but I will concede. We're going to get into specifics when we get to the very end where we rank within the tiers themselves.
Yes.
But like, I want to clarify, it's an A-. It's just getting in the A tier.
Yes.
I concede a B+, but I think visually it's at the bottom of the A rank.
Yes.
For me, I'd say.
I'll put it in the A tier. Like I said, the actual collective list that we're building, we will periodically visualize this. If you're keeping up, you've got to get good enough memory. You'll remember me saying I've just put it in the A tier, but we'll see. And then we have our own rankings as well. So I'll put it down in the B for myself. And hopefully that'll all be visualized on screen in a lovely, lovely fashion. Next game down is Spider-Man Miles Morales. Another A tier, I would say.
B tier for me.
What do you mean? What do you mean? What do you mean?
This was the one that was going to hurt me. I'm just slumping in my chair right now because it brings me no joy to say this. I love so much in Miles Morales. I think, again, from a presentational perspective, it's absolutely fantastic. Scott Tilford, I think Miles Morales as a character is perfectly explored. It made me fall in love with this iteration of him, not to mention the supporting cast and his family and being able to spend time with his mom and stuff like that. And like I said, the animations to his swinging. I always wondered, like, in motion, how are they going to make Miles different from Peter and not just have it feel like a reskin of the same moves? And to me, after playing Miles Morales, I thought the Venom moves were more impressive and more satisfying than the gadgets in the original game, as was Miles's approach to swinging and the personality that came through in it. That said, while I think the ingredients are amazing, it falls down for me on a narrative level and a mission design level.
Actually, yeah.
The narrative didn't do it for me, especially coming so soon after Into the Spider-Verse, especially the stuff with the Prowler, which I just thought was a worse version of what we've seen before. In the overall narrative with, in how neat it was at the end with the tech villain getting immediately sort of just arrested and then everything's back to normal and good. It was great for what it was. But I don't think it's proper A material as a whole.
My only knock with Miles Morales is towards the end, the bit where you go to space.
That's the bit I like,
Why? That was like an Injustice finisher, and I love Injustice. But yeah, it was the way that stuff sort of wrapped up where I was just a bit like, oh, that's just a bit too goofy and doesn't feel like it fits the tone you've had until then or the consistency of the context or whatever. I just thought it was such a streamlined version of Spider-Man 1. Like you got rid of the science puzzles, you made it way more immediate. The mission design is way more immediate. Minus that one when you've got to move the trains around and lock them into place and stuff. Yeah. That was a bit too Rockstar, modern age Rockstar for me. And we'll talk about Spider-Man bloat when we get to Spider-Man 2 and horrific mission design. So for me, less is more, and I thought Miles Morales was nicely refined. However, I totally get your arguments, and I don't mind considering the quality of what we've got here, sliding that in on a B tier, and I would have it on the A tier.
No, you know what? Like, you conceded Forbidden West, and I'm happy to concede Miles Morales, because like I said, this is the one I'm coming in, and I feel like a B is... It's harsh, it's what I believe in, but, if it's alongside stuff like Forbidden West, I had as many problems as Forbidden West, probably. Maybe not on the whole in terms of narrative and mission design like I had with Miles Morales, but probably had more fun just swinging around in Miles Morales than I did in Forbidden West. I don't know if you're watching, you can see this in the video, but I'm ripping the skin off my hands because this is paining me to go through. I'm gonna go a B plus, but I'll concede the A if you want to put.
I'll happily put it in the A tier for now
for the overall.
I think it's better than Spider-Man 2, so we'll get to that conversation in due time.
Revisit that.
Next game down is Helldivers 2, possibly the best PlayStation 5 game so far. This is an easy S tier.
This is one I have to sit out because I've only played a handful of hours at this point, and I've not really done it quote-unquote properly with a dedicated team. So is this fully S-tier material?
Oh, dude,
I know the hype was real a few months ago, but I didn't know if perceptions had maybe changed a bit. I've not really kept up with it.
I would have kept playing it if I didn't have to take care of a tiny newborn, but that's the only thing that was important enough to take me off this video game. I know that Mr. Ewan Patterson is still playing through it over on the main channel. I just think Helldivers 2 is immaculate. Like, yeah, those first few weeks was something else. The momentum has only kept up. The way that, I'm blanking on the name of the devs. What the hell's the name of the devs?
It's I'm also
developer
blanking.
Arrowhead, for the love of God. The way that Arrowhead as a dev stepped up and were able to harness the momentum and just, I would say, revolutionize live service stuff. Like, you've got this idea where everyone's leaping in, doing squad-based, horde mode type stuff, very reminiscent of the apex of Gears of War, like, the horde modes in Gears 2, Gears 3, etc. To be able to have that as a foundation, and then you're kind of leaning on various sci-fi themes, like the music is quite, connotes things like Alien or whatever it is, but then to plug things into the game without most of the player base realizing, just because of the reality of how they've coded it, where like all of a sudden someone just gets taken out by like a rogue sniper shot or a laser beam or a ghost that's flying around, and then it's like, what the hell is that? And then you've all got to figure it out as a community. That's one of the coolest ways to manage a community in general. And that goes alongside the fact that the gunplay is just so responsive and just super satisfying. I think that they do a really magical thing with getting you right to the line of survivability. Like, you're just making it out of those firefights each time, which is in itself, like I said, reminiscent of like 80s and 90s sci-fi horror movies. And it is the aliens scene. Like, it is the scene in Predator where you're all having to go, you're all trying to bear everything down. It's so well done. And it took them like a decade to pull it together.
Yeah.
But it's one of the rare video games that actually does feel like they took a decade's worth of innovation and lessons learned and looking at the competition, etc., to do something that is not only quite refreshing and unique in spots, but also worth all that time on a gameplay side. I effing love Helldivers 2. I think it's perfect.
I think in terms of its impact on gaming, but specifically Sony and PlayStation as a company as well, like, it should not be...
They had no idea what they had.
No, they had no idea what they had.
They had no idea.
I think it's crazy now. I was just reading through their recent conference internally to kind of lay out their next 12 months and stuff. And the amount of times Helldivers?
Helldavid?
Oh, that's the next spin-off, isn't it? Helldivers 2 is name-dropped, is crazy. Like, it's mentioned alongside Marvel's Spider-Man 2 in regards to their greatest successes. It has sold more than Marvel's Spider-Man 2, and it only came out at the start of the year. Obviously, a bunch of those sales are from PC as well as PlayStation, but it seems to have just changed the trajectory of what PlayStation wants to do with live services, because this now feels like the model. The way they're talking about it, how successful it is, it just seems to have changed their approach, and even now they've committed to releasing these live service games in the future on PC day and date alongside the PlayStation consoles that they're releasing on as well. So it's like, that is obviously the model going forward, and it's kind of all thanks to Helldivers 2 being such a huge success and garnering so much goodwill in the community as well.
Yeah, man. It's a reminder of what you can do when you actually let a team cook for a while and don't just sort of nakedly chase various things that are happening in the moment. It was such a reckless abandon, like the amount of live service stuff that Sony greenlighted over the last few years during the Jim Ryan era that then just went to the wayside, whether that's Last of Us Factions or the 5 other games that they've mentioned that have barely been detailed since. Helldivers 2, like I said, is an S tier unless you want to knock it down a bit.
No, I have no reason to.
Gosh. Next game is Forspoken.
When I was trying to put this list together and make sure nothing slipped through the cracks, I forgot about this so much. I always forget that it was an exclusive. It feels like a third-party game that completely bombed, but for it to be so associated with PlayStation, Scott Tilford, you played more of it than I did, but I know that this game was dead before it even came out.
Oh,
right?
yeah,
like, the public perception of it was absolutely in the toilet, and I think it's a little bit harsh, but I don't think it was harsh enough for me to put it in like C tier or B tier.
I played about 3 to 4, 5 hours of it. I don't like it's. It's just fine. Like, it is very much the audience-tested, like, mass demographic amalgamation splodge that you assume that it is. Whether that's down to extremely boring generic writing, like the whole "did that just happen?" the thing that we're all very much sick of. But the reality of game development meant that it was put in motion long before people got so sick of things like Disney writing, MCU writing, etc. I do think the game's intro is the best part. I think like Ella Balinska is an awesome actress. I think the whole opening bit with her actually makes that whole her general like surprise at what she's able to do kind of work in context, at least better than the reception the game had, reputation the game has, would let you believe. However, the combat is just unresponsive and kind of ugly. It's all very spongy, holding the triggers down stuff, where it just doesn't feel very responsive. It's just a weird feeling game overall. And then you have really, really boring generic mission design, general map design, even art design. Like certain locations have that Square Enix flair, but it's just not really there overall. Like this is Luminous Productions, who did Final Fantasy 15, and just not really any of that comes through. And I know that the studio were like shut down, moved around internally inside Square Enix. It also contributed to their over £100 million loss. They had to write off a whole bunch of assets because the game didn't sell. For me, I just think it's completely serviceable. And so my golden rule is always, what were they going for? What did they nail? They made a boring 5, 6 out of 10 open world third person shooter thing with loot components or whatever. So to me, it's a C. It's not aggressively FU. It's not, like if you don't play anything in this world and this is your first ever video game, you'd probably smile and have a bit of fun.
Right. It's
like it works. And so I'm saving the D tier for something that is more offensively bad, like Destruction AllStars, but we'll get there. So for me, it's a C tier.
Yeah, okay, you convinced me. That was like a lawyer doing like their final statement, and you know what? I'm the jury. They've convinced me.
Not absolutely at the complete bottom, but near enough. Next game down is Returnal.
Scott, man, you know what I am going to give this. In fact, if we had an S plus tier, it would go in that. This is an easy S for me. This is still maybe my favorite game, exclusive of the generation so far. I remember when I reviewed this way back when, I kind of had no faith in it. If you go back to the podcast that we did in the run up to Returnal, we were both kind of like, I'm not really sure. And I only played it at launch because we got a review code in and I wouldn't have paid for it then otherwise. And maybe it was those low expectations, but I don't think so. I was completely blown away by it. It was such a fully formed package for me. I've gone on about it so many times over the years, but this was a game so good, it sold me on an entire genre. Even Hades didn't make me a roguelike fan, and I loved Hades, but even that I had my fill of after a while. Never got the true ending of that game or anything like that. I just kind of had my fill. Whereas Returnal, I played that all the way through, and then I went back through it again to get the platinum. Like, I rinsed it. I just thought the gunplay was as tight as I have ever seen on the PlayStation so far. The narrative was so right up my street with these sort of dreamscapes that were conjured as you controlled this character on an alien landscape, stuck in this time loop that might have been real, might not have been real. Is it a manifestation of her grief? Is it not? Is she an astronaut? Who's a mom? Who's a child? All of these great questions that made me want to continue doing runs even when I was getting my ass kicked. So it had that mechanical hook as well as that story hook, and it just kept serving up like insane visuals that I still think about today. Some of the bosses, some of the themes for those bosses, going down to the depths of this underwater Lovecraftian nightmare hellscape towards the end. Oh my God, I'm just saying things now. Buzzwords, adjectives.
Look, the thing is, the people who love Returnal absolutely love Returnal to their core, because if this game clicked with you, there are few things better than it. It did with me to a certain point, but by the time I got to those last couple of biomes, I just thought that its difficulty and its repetition was just poisoning the entire experience. Love the art design, love the story direction. I'm not going to push back on the S tier stuff because I do think it just is so incredibly tight, and it was very much a subjective thing on my part where I just got sick of the difficulty level. I got sick of how much you could do a 40 to 45 minute run and then be knocked all the way back to the start. That was genuinely life destroying after a while, because I was like, I need this game out of my life, and I could not effing beat it, and it was so infuriating. Getting to the last boss, getting to the last area, and then just dying over and over again. Just so annoying. And it's like, I have no problem with hard games. I've played everything from Sekiro, the Souls series, whatever the hell it is. I don't care. I'll give it a good go. And 9 times out of 10, I'll get through it. But there was something about Returnal that was just so annoying. And I do remember realizing they might have patched it now, but the reason I finally got through was exploiting the way the AI tracks you, where you can kind of break the game. Again, they might have patched it, where if you just sort of dance forward and back whilst you're strafing, just sort of wiggle around a little bit, everything just misses you. And as soon as I realized that, I dominated the last couple of bosses, and I was like, oh, I could have been doing that for hours. And so I assume that they fixed that stuff, but it's not a knock on everything that you just said. It is an S tier. It's easily one of the best PlayStation exclusives. It's easily one of the best console exclusives. Almost everybody who's given it a go, and shout out to R.I.P. James Dowse, he's out there somewhere. That man absolutely loved Returnal as well, even though he was kind of like me, banging his head against the wall, being annoyed, but still keeping playing. If we're talking about reasons to invest in a PlayStation 5 or what the PS5 can do, Returnal's easily up there.
100%.
So,
I think it's interesting, Scott,
yes,
that the 2 S tiers we've given so far are, kind of double A games, for lack of a better
almost
term.
like it's the future of the industry.
That's not a knock on them at all, but in terms of how they were marketed and their production resources that were put into them, they are the ones that have kind of come out on top and given us something a little bit different that has remained memorable in a way that some of the biggest AAA games have not.
Did you not miss not being able to zoom in and look at individual eyelash follicles and everything, though?
Well, no, because here's the thing. Returnal is still beautiful, my friend.
Well, because gameplay's better. You don't need it. Actually, I should do a lol. I put Returnal in a D. No, I put Returnal in a D for me. Returnal's a D tier game.
It's a D.
For this guy. For this guy here.
Wait.
I hate that game.
Whoa. I'm signaling the alarm. Returnal. I'm losing my mind. Returnal, a D.
For my personal list.
Forspoken, a C.
For my personal list, I enjoyed Forspoken more than Returnal.
But if we're going by the Tale 40 method of...
There's a curve to it.
What did they go for versus what did they achieve?
Yeah.
Surely Returnal is higher on that stage than...
You would think so, but I would say in regards to, if we're going to analyze the roguelike genre, we're going to analyze the difficulty curve, the challenge, that kind of stuff, the boss design, how trial and error it gets, like that stuff towards the end just got horrible.
See, if we saw, you came out and you were like, right, it's a D, it's all right. But previously, this only hurts because you've just established that the D is saved for a specific brand of terrible.
Personal list is different. I would say.
I'm going to have to move on. I'm going to lose it.
I reserve things like this to dig the knife back into Returnal for what it did to me. I can't not just little jab.
I'm going to take that knife out. You know what? I'm going to stand in front, and then you can stab me.
Go around him.
I'll take it.
I must cleave Returnal in the kidneys. The next game down is Fort Solace, a horrific video game. Just what?
I'm shocked. No, sorry, I don't want to interrupt you. I thought
I wanted to love this.
I thought you turned around on it by the end.
No, this is kind of PlayStation 5's Hellblaze. If you like games where you're just pushing up on the analog stick and pretending that it's an enjoyable experience, you would love Fort Solace. I very much did not. Even though it does have a really cool setup, this idea of being stuck on a planet, trying to figure out what happened with this science base that went crazy. Troy Baker's in it. There's a lot of cool ideas, and it was one of those games where I just bought it outright. Like every now and then, I'll just buy something outright. Put my money where my mouth is, support new IP, support new ideas, just get it out there. And then I always say I reserve the right to be like, well, wasn't worth my money, that wasn't worth my time. Fort Solace is an incredibly short video game, made even shorter by the fact that you can't run even when things are blowing up all around you, and your character clearly would want to get a bit of a step on, but they don't. And I just found it to be a turgid experience, not saved by the atmosphere, the writing, etc., even though that stuff is really cool. And Roger Clark's in it, like I said, Troy Baker's in it as well. It just was a cool looking sci-fi game that seemed like it was trading on Dead Space in terms of the camera angle and the setting, the lighting, but is far more of just it's not even a walking simulator, like, you know, that, because that genre implies something more like Gone Home or whatever, like a satisfying narrative, things to do. Fort Solace is just walking around. You pick up a Rubik's Cube, you put it down, you walk a little bit more. I hated it.
I'm kind of pleased I haven't played it because it sounds like something that I would love and you would hate.
Yeah.
You know, kind of like Hellblade.
It sounds like us.
It does sound like us.
He's not finished Hellblade yet. I'm waiting to see what you think of Hellblade.
I know. I will get to the end of it.
He's at the bit where it seems to tease actual things are going to happen.
Yeah.
Nah.
I know you said, and I know it was a joke. I won't take it as a knife in the side. You said that people don't find anything fun about pressing up, and I get it. You know, a lot of people don't like minimal gameplay. They don't like games as experiences or games trying to be films or whatever. As long as the story's good, I'm here for it.
Same.
But I haven't played Fort Solace, so I'm going to have to concede to you in wherever the hell you want to put it.
If we're doing but again, if it's what did they go for, what did they nail? I mean, even then, the actual delivery of the story is so plodding. The fact that it felt like they had to make it so you couldn't do more than just a slow saunter. Otherwise, you'd finish it literally in like 20 minutes.
Right.
So I do think it has to be quite near the bottom. I'm rethinking my Forspoken at a C the more we get through
yeah,
this. I'm debating maybe that should be down there in a D, because Fort Solace, I would say, is a D.
Right.
Then I wouldn't say Forspoken's better than Fort Solace.
Well, there we go.
So I'm gonna
It's a brick wall at
I'm
this
just going to
point.
have to Fort Solace down in the D, Forspoken. I am moving to the D unless you prefer
God.
it.
No, man,
in the
that
C.
actually, my mental illness is cured now that you are moving that at least to this. Like, I couldn't live in a world where Returnal was lower than that, even on your personal one. I don't think we could have been friends, so.
No, that's fair enough. Fort Solace is in a D in the bigger list, and then on my personal list will also be in a D, alongside Returnal. So we'll have to see how we go. After Fort Solace, we have Stellar Blade.
An interesting one, this, because it's really good, Stellar Blade. I had a lot of fun with it this year. Part of me wants to give it an A, but I don't think it's good enough for that. I think it hits the B tier for me, because while I would recommend it to pretty much everyone and did have a lot of fun with it, I do think there's a better version of that game still to come with a sequel. And I do think it's a game that finds itself the more it goes on and becomes more confident and becomes more polished and has a higher level of quality as you reach the end. I think it's definitely a game of two halves, in that the first half literally is worse than the second half, and it doesn't make a first great impression. And some of the combat could be a little bit tighter. Some of the storytelling could be a little bit more interesting and not as repetitive. And it's an issue I have, because a lot of those criticisms are solved by the time you get to the end of the game. It just takes the entire game to get there. So for me, it's a B, but it's a high B. You know, there's nothing wrong with that.
No, I think that's completely fair. I think for me, it probably is a B. I like how much it accomplished. I did a tweet or whatever first, but I think it's a victory for new IP. I think it's a reminder that new ideas can work in the gaming industry. Like, for this to come out of nowhere, it's developers Shift Up's second game, and their first one was a mobile game. And I know that when people looked at the credits in Stellar Blade, they realized that Sony did help them massively to get it over the finish line. And you can feel that when you play it. There's a lot of PS5 features in there, like the haptic feedback stuff, the general way that it works. I just find it to be a really gorgeous game that shows off what a PS5 can do, and there are so few of them that are genuinely just PS5 exclusives. I do think the combat, to the developer's own admission, favors animation over responsiveness, which is always a killer for me in combat-heavy video games. Like, I want to be able to parry or dodge or move when I hit the button, and not wait for your beautiful animation to play out. And depending on the move you're doing, you can cancel out some of them, not others. I know they've patched it a few times to try and address that, but I don't think they found the sweet spot with it. But overall, I just think that it's such a full package. Like, it's so awesomely inspired by Nier Automata, but then it does have these wider, almost Darksiders kind of vibes as well. And I just like that stuff a lot. So but I can easily go with a B. I mean, I know that a lot of the marketing and a lot of the way that Shift Up have talked about it is kind of they don't make them like they used to style approach. And this is a reminder of that late 2000s 360 era action game, which I love. Like, if video games is an art form, which it is, and a widespread medium, we shouldn't say those things as negatives.
No.
Which I will bring that back when we talk about Kena Bridge of Spirits, because the big complaint with that was it's a PS2 platformer. And I'm like, some of the best platformers in the world. The world?
No, I think you're absolutely spot on with that assessment, Scott, because Stellar Blade, I liked it being a throwback. Sometimes I thought it lent too heavily on throwback game design and mechanics. Like,
Go find the key card.
Yeah, which I don't really mind. To me, it was more raise the water level in this sewer, which I popped at the first time, but when it came back a second time, I thought, maybe there are some things we can leave behind in the PS3 and Xbox 360 generation, or even before then, the PS2 generation.
I would love to talk to a game dev and be like, where did sewer levels come from? And why did they stick around? I know the reason is because they're, in terms of geometry, they're easier to code. You can make a player go down a certain route. It's literally just a real-world version of a corridor sequence, an underground corridor sequence or whatever. But yeah, something when it comes to Stellar Blade overall, where we're saying B.
B, I think.
The first B tier game, I'm going to put it in A, I think.
Ooh,
for my personal one. So I'm just really impressed by Stellar Blade. I love what it represents. Astro's Playroom, the best PlayStation 5 game.
Is it though?
Yeah.
Is it though?
How is it not?
I cannot sanction this buffoonery. As a huge Astro's Playroom fan and as
put it in the S tier there, mate.
Big fan of Astro's adventures on the PS VR, both the actual game and the tech demo as well. Of course you didn't.
No.
I prefer that version of Astro, and I love the experience that you get with Astro's Playroom. I love it as a love letter to PlayStation history. I love it as a showcase of what the DualSense controller can do. But the question is, to me, is it a game? I think it's a good tech demo, but for me to put it in the A tier would be to put it alongside the likes of Horizon and what have you. Would I sit down?
Well, you said A, S is what we're aiming for, mate.
Wait, well, you might be aiming for. This is what I'm aiming for. You know, would I put it? Would I go to you?
Is it a game
right now? Yeah. Would I go to someone and say, play Astro's Playroom over Horizon Forbidden West?
Yes.
Nah. No way.
1,000,000%. Go play the bloated 200-hour spodge that has no ending and wants you to come back for another game, or go play an actual video game.
What do you mean an actual video game?
They don't make them anymore. Look at all the pupil dilation. Look at the god rays.
But Astro's Playroom is literally a tech demo doing stuff like that.
But not in the same way that something like Hellblade 2 or Matrix Awakens or whatever is. It's literally a video game with levels. There are online multiplayer challenge leaderboards. Like, it's a full-on video game.
There are all of those things in Hellblade. No, there aren't. Things. There aren't any leaderboards to my knowledge. But there are levels. There is a narrative, you know. To say Hellblade is a tech demo and Astro's Playroom isn't. Hellblade 2 isn't. That is crazy to me.
I can only beg you to finish Hellblade 2 and then see what you think of that game's story.
But even then, even then, if the story's bad, it's done enough already to not just be to not have them on the same level.
Hellblade 2, I mean, this is a fantastic conversation. Hellblade 2 versus Astro's Playroom. The comments can weigh in. Hellblade 2 is literally just holding up on the analog stick and putting a couple of puzzle pieces in place and then keeping moving forward through a series of corridors and watching cutscenes, etc. Astro's Playroom is literally a 3D platformer that's super responsive. Yes, it has the haptic feedback and it shows instant loading and whatever, but it's far more of a video game. It belongs far more in the medium than Hellblade does.
Whoa, that is outrageous.
No, it's not.
I'm a fan of Astro's Playroom. Don't get me wrong. I think it's really good. I think it is an experience. I think it is a tech demo, and it's one of the best you'll ever play. And like I said, it's a love letter. I do think you should play it just over other games.
I think you should play it over other games. You mean the opposite of that? I
mean the opposite. That's what I mean. That the question mark on the end of mine. Should you play it over other games?
Yes, you should.
It's rhetorical because I think no.
What's your ranking for it?
After all that, I'll probably give it an A. I think I'll give it an A. An A or a high B, maybe.
I'll settle for an A. I'll put it in an S for myself.
This is where the idea of it being a ranking falls down.
Disarray.
Because that means I think Astro's Playroom is better than Spider-Man Miles Morales, and I can't sanction that buffoonery for myself.
You've got your personal list for such
that's true.
Shenanigans.
That's true. Let's give it an A because it is. Look, I'm slagging it off, but I'm not really because it is great. It is great. I question that idea, like I've repeated myself so many times, of it being like a complete game. That's something you would recommend over something else. I love it. I think everyone should play it. I would recommend it to everyone. But that's, if we're getting very granular about the tiers, that's my only complaint with Astro's Playroom, because otherwise he's my boy. He knows he's my boy. And it's a great showcase for
his head becomes an umbrella when it rains. Look, I love the way this game plays. I just don't think you can fault the gameplay. Yes, it's short. It was a freebie. It was given out with all the PlayStation 5s. Of course, yeah, there's a tech demo aspect to it, but it doesn't get away from just how well made it is. I think it's a poster boy, Astro Boy, for the whole idea of a short video game can be worth just as much as something that's 100 hours long or whatever. I do think it's immaculate. I always have since day one. I don't think you can beat it. It's such an easy S tier for me. And like the icing on the cake is look, you're running through through PS1 stuff, PS2 stuff, all the reminders of different franchises. I love Astro Bot a lot. Anyway, next game down is Pacific Drive. This is the only one on this list that I haven't played.
This is a game that is probably a timed exclusive, but at the time of recording, we don't know when it's going to come to the other consoles, so it counts, goddammit. And Pacific Drive is definitely the sleeper hit for me of 2024 so far. I thought visually this game looked interesting, but I didn't realize how much it was gonna grip me. And if you haven't played this, which I understand because it kind of went under the radar a few months ago, it's essentially a survival game where you have to survive going out on runs into a wilderness that is suffering from a bunch of environmental disasters and crazy weather and radiation and the whole atmosphere falling apart, essentially. What you have to do is go out in your car and you have to scavenge materials and bring it back to your home base while completing objectives. But the hook is that you're essentially upgrading your car sort of Mad Max style as you go. You're making it more durable, you're making it more resistant to all of the, roadblocks, literally and figuratively, that you're coming into contact with. And that loop for me, man, was absolutely sensational. I'm not really a car guy. I don't love car video games or racing games. I enjoy them, but they're not something I gravitate towards.
Right.
However, I'm quickly realizing that vehicle maintenance is so my thing. Upgrading the ship in Dredge, I absolutely loved. Upgrading the car in Pacific Drive was so satisfying to me, to give it doors that were lead resistance or corrosive resistant, and having better headlights so I could see further in the dark, or a better fuel tank.
Shout out to Days Gone's bike.
Yeah, literally.
While we're on.
More fuel tanks to take up my limited inventory space so I could drive for further. Just that sort of sense of progression and satisfaction I got from initially going out on every run and worrying that I was going to get demolished and not make it back with my stuff and have to start from scratch, to being a road warrior and a master of the waste who could go out, bring back all of this scrap and just, keep my car as pristine as possible. That to me was incredibly satisfying. However, what stops it getting into the S tier for me is that the story ultimately isn't all that good. It has great world building and a lot of potential, but I hit the credits and kind of thought, is that it? I thought it would have a better conclusion, and it feels like it's holding out for DLC or a sequel, which is what stops it from getting to that next level. On top of some repetition in the scavenging, because you are essentially doing the same thing over and over again to get that vehicle up. So great game, would definitely recommend it. Real surprise of this year, and I hope the DLC and sequel knocks it up to that next tier.
I'd like to get there eventually for it. You're saying it's not an S. Are you saying it's an A?
It's an A. It's an A for me, absolutely.
That's alongside my friend Astro's Playroom, which I will just have to believe you for.
Yeah, you will.
Is Pacific Drive a video game?
It's more a bloody video game than Astro's Playroom.
Can you push up on the analog stick? Next game down is Final Fantasy XVI, one of my favorite games of all time, but that's more of a subjective thing. In terms of the game's general reception and the wider conversation on it, like the fact that it didn't sell loads for Square Enix, the fact that, we'll get to Final Fantasy VII Rebirth, which is maybe a timed exclusive, but is also an exclusive. That general performance of Final Fantasy in the modern day is one of the most fascinating things in the industry right now, I think, considering just how prolific Final Fantasy is. And then for two numbered installments, obviously one of them being a remake and extension of that, to not blow the world up is kind of fascinating. I love 16, absolutely love the music, love the characters so much. I've finished both sets of DLC. I think that idea of going on a journey with a certain character, like 16 is one of the only games the only game where you follow the protagonist from a very young age at different points in their life. And I just think they nail that whole idea of what it means to take over this band of people who are looking after the planet, let's say. And I like all that stuff. I just think 16 is a hell of a journey, and I actually really like the combat. I totally get why people find it repetitive. But I found that the amount that you could customize, all the different moves that you have access to, that gave me something close to speccing a party in a traditional Final Fantasy, and then the different ways that you can juggle all these different things together. 16 reminds me in a weird way of Returnal, where not everyone clicked with it, but if you did and you liked going on that journey, the journey that 16 offers you is absolutely phenomenal.
So where would you put it?
It's S tier for me, but that's going to be my subjective list. I'm going S tier for my personal one because I'm head ill, and then I will put it in. I would say it's an A. I would have to concede a B if you don't see the vision, but I think it's an easy A tier.
No, you know what? I'm happy with A. Final Fantasy 16 is a game I had lots of issues with, but taken as a whole, I do think it's an excellent experience. I had a lot more fun with it in certain areas than I expected to. I thought the story, while it does, for me, falter bits towards the end, still has a lot of great moments and a truly memorable cast of characters. I think I couldn't give a game with boss fights like this anything lower than an A because they were spectacular and they honestly were pushing the PlayStation 5 for me more than most other games released so far. The scale of them was absolutely insane and something that I wasn't expecting, so that was enjoyable. The only thing that stops it getting an S mainly is the length and the side content. I reckon this could have easily gotten into S tier for me if it was 20 hours rather than 50 hours all told, just because, and I know we disagree on the side mission thing, but they were too basic for me. I did feel like they were sort of wasting my time, and that combined with for me, a lack of progression in something like the weapon upgrade system or the economy just made me wonder after a while, like, well, why am I engaging with this part of the game? If I just maybe mainline the main story, I might have had more fun with it overall. So we're going to talk about Final Fantasy VII Rebirth in a bit, but I've had that with every Final Fantasy game I've played so far, where I think, did you need the extra stuff? Yeah, maybe if it was more streamlined, maybe a bit shorter, maybe more focused on the things it did well, it could have broken into there. But I'll happily concede an A because I do think it is spectacular still. Yeah, I think a lot of like modern Final Fantasies, like 16 specifically gets lost in MMO framings because it is Naoki Yoshida who did come off Final Fantasy 14, and then there's a lot of that game's DNA or a lot of MMO trappings in 16. I thought thematically it totally worked because it was just small little fetch quests. You were doing right by this populace, and it kind of thematically worked with being this leader that's helping everybody out. I did a whole video on why Final Fantasy 16 is genius, at least in my opinion, because that stuff really immersed me in being the new Cid and all that kind of stuff. So I loved all that, even though I get the argument on the gameplay side that it's very basic, but I argue that's the point. But that's going to be the difference between our personal lists and a wider list. I put it in A tier for now. Yeah, let's go for that. As long as you're not going to argue for the yes, because I could totally understand how much you loved it. No, I think it to be up there. That's definitely me pushing that. I think Final Fantasy 16 is an S tier Final Fantasy for some, even though I say that, and in the Final Fantasy ranking list that me and Sai did, I think it landed on B. Right. In terms of the wide all 16 main games. But still, Final Fantasy 16 is a fascinating conversation, and everybody who's played it has an opinion on it, whether that be the boss battles or the combat system or where it sits in the franchise. The next game down is Rise of the Ronin, something that I tried 3 times and bounced the F off. I'm going to defer to you. Something that I absolutely loved, and part of me wants to give it an A because I had such a fun time with it. But if I'm looking at other games that I've ranked so far, is it better than Stellar Blade? Is it better than Spider-Man Miles Morales? I think if we were taking purely the combat and the design around that, it would absolutely be up there. But because it is sadly 60 hours, maybe even longer, and it's not just the combat, I'm gonna have to consider other stuff. I think, like, graphically, you know, a lot was said before launch about it looking like a PS3 game. I think it looks good, but not what you would expect from a big PlayStation 5 exclusive. I think the story, while ambitious, doesn't really capitalize on its RPG framing and the choices that you make throughout the game. It just doesn't feel stitched together in a truly satisfying way, all told. And I do think, you know, the repetition of the game design is impossible to ignore. It has that sort of Assassin's Creed style open world structure where you've got, well, this time around, I think it's 3 separate open worlds, but they're all repeated. They're all populated, with the same repeated missions. You know, you got bounties to take out, you got like strongholds to liberate, which worked for me in this game because the combat is so satisfying that I just wanted an excuse to indulge in it. But I can certainly see people picking it up and going, well, I've had a version of this before. So now I'm actually talking myself into a B. I think that probably... I think that's fair. Like I said, B is still really good. I'd still recommend everything in the B tier. It just is that it's lacking that polish. It's lacking that extra X factor to really let it go, shoulder to shoulder with the likes of Final Fantasy or even Horizon Forbidden West, which I'm also looking at now and thinking, is that supposed to be a B? But we'll
come back to that.
I'll get back to that at some point.
It's fine. I feel like Rise of the Ronin is a nice companion to Stellar Blade. Like, it's a nice B tier game. It is one of those 8 out of 10 games that you would play when you were younger, or you'd play in general, and just remember fondly. Like, I couldn't get away with the combat. I just felt like I was too sick of it after 2 Neo games and Wolong Fallen Dynasty. But whatever. Like, it massively has its fans. There are obviously things that work for it. You absolutely loved it, and there are some cool innovations in there, like using the grapple hook to grab parts of the environment and fling explosives at people or whatever it is. There's some really cool gameplay ideas there.
I think if you had like the good parts of Stellar Blade and the good parts of Rise of the Ronin and merged them together, you'd have the perfect video game, Yeah. That's all I'm waiting for.
It's a whole specific, like I said, 4-star, 4.5-star tier. That would be awesome. Next game down is Gran Turismo 7, a extremely slick, enjoyable video game that I not necessarily dropped off in a negative way, but I love my time with it. And then for whatever reason, I guess other stuff came out a few years ago. I just never went back to it.
Yeah.
But I thoroughly enjoyed my time with it, and I like the presentation of it. I get the fan complaints that the game is over monetized. There are a lot of microtransaction stuff in there. And there's a whole thing in there about the game's economy and how Polyphony Digital wanted it to replicate the idea of buying a real life supercar. So they massively juiced the prices of stuff. And I know that's been a constant back and forth with the community. But Gran Turismo, obviously a legacy franchise. Like, I mean, I go right back to the original one. This was a good Gran Turismo. It didn't blow me away, but I thought it was very, very solid.
No, I'm with you. It's a good one. And like I just said, when we were talking about Pacific Drive, maybe I'm going to be more harsh on it because, like I said, this genre isn't necessarily for me, and I have always lent towards the likes of Forza Horizon rather than a racing sim, or Burnout, or even something like Grid, rather than a more pure racing sim like Gran Turismo 7. But I still think it's a really good game. It would be in the B tier for me. And like you, I thought I was going to enjoy it more than I did because I played the hell out of it when we got it to review. But similarly, I dropped off and only picked it up when the PSVR 2 came out because it was compatible. And maybe if I was factoring in that, compatibility, it would get knocked up to an A because it is fantastic in VR. But without that, I'm happy with a B personally.
Yeah, I go B as well. I think it's fascinating, like, this many years in. I don't know how many people out there, how many decades or how many years you've been playing video games for, but that whole cycle, that cyclical nature of driving games where it's, oh my God, look how shiny the cars are. Oh my God, look how incredible the interiors are. And then that idea of what does a car sim serve at this point? And is it enough to just be another car game, to be another Gran Turismo? Because it was interesting watching Gran Turismo 7 and then playing it, where their innovations are more around weather systems and the general presentation of invoking this sort of narrative where you're going to different coffee shops and then picking races and cars from menus and stuff like that, and leaning on this really cool, like I said, slick presentation, because the fundamentals are just so solid at this point. It's kind of the same thing that I think certain sports genres have got, like football or boxing or whatever, where it is a case of refinement at this point, where the innovation to some degree has gone away. And I know that petrolhead gamers are going to say, what the hell are you talking about? There are XYZ things that are blowing this out the water. But it is part of that conversation about what, in terms of where it then sits in the company that we've got here. Yeah,
I feel like, Gran Turismo used to be almost untouchable, and now it feels like when it arrives, apart from like the hardcore fans, it just feels like, oh, it's another Gran Turismo. I feel like it hasn't really wowed in a little while.
That's kind of my wider point, is I don't even know if a car game can.
Right, oh yeah. I think Forza Horizon 5, I thought that was really sick, but
it was pretty sick.
This is a PlayStation 1, so I want to talk about Forza.
Maybe someday we will rank all the Xbox, I was going to say One exclusives, but Series exclusives.
Yep, we will do all 5 of them.
Yeah, we will see. The next game down is Ratchet & Clank Rift Apart, a game that I would say is an S tier or at least an A tier, but I know that Josh Brown does not agree.
It's a B tier for
Josh Brown hates platformers. Get that on a t-shirt. He can't stand them. Hates them.
At least this one's an actual fully...
Is it a video game? Platformers don't count, apparently.
Platformers do count. I like myself a good platformer now and again. Like I said, B isn't bad. B does not stand for bad. B stands for beautiful. It stands for what other good adjectives be? No, who knows? No one knows.
Bloody perfect. Why is this not an S or an A?
It's not an S or an A because I think Ratchet & Clank Rift Apart is really good, but personally, I wouldn't recommend it to everyone because I just don't think, truthfully, it's all that fun. I think it's really pretty to look at, and I like the idea of it using the PS5 tech to, kind of squashed levels together and use the interdimensional tech in the game to have you jump from one location to the next, or even change time periods during certain points. It's lush. It's so pristinely put together. I don't even have that many faults about it. I just personally don't find it all that exciting to play, and all that exciting to even kind of talk about. Like, I think it's good but not great. I just can't get over that hurdle for whatever reason, and that's not coming from even someone who hates platformers. Like, I used to love Ratchet and Clank back in the day. Like, I preferred Ratchet and Clank over Jack and Daxter way back when. And I loved the sort of remake / reboot / reimagining that came out in, I think, 2016. So that was pretty good as well, but I just don't think it's more than pretty good.
Right, okay. For me, it was just that it is this immaculate execution of a vision. Like, it just plays so well. It plays like a Pixar movie, or what we used to remember from Pixar movies when they used to be so eye-widening and jaw-dropping across the 2000s. Like I said, animation is absolutely top-notch here. I don't care about pupil dilation, random stupid features that you can only see if you zoom in on a photo mode, but this game has them. And I think for some reason it means more to me when you're bringing an entire world to life and just replicating our own. So in this case, you've got all those incredible sci-fi backdrops, or those certain locations, like there's like that gas planet. There are all these different things that are so visually arresting. And like, I get the argument that it didn't show off the instant loading stuff, the SSD tech, as much as it could. There's only really one level where you're hitting these crystals and then they immediately pulse and everything like loads around you. And that was one of the only times where it felt like, oh my God, it's literally loading in real time. Versus the literal on-rail stuff where you're going through different dimensions. However, I'm always going to be a gameplay forward and first person, and I just think it's just so responsive. Like, the weapon variety is awesome. The new age Ratchet and Clank stuff, which is like a melding of the original platformers and then the weapon focus that they had across the late 2000s, and bringing that into its own from 2016, and then this, where it is just hold L1 to make it go into a third person shooter, and you've got these really cool evasion moves and everything. I just think that's awesome. And there's even, you can argue, an SSD loading gun where you're just shooting assets out of it. And it's like, that's such a cool idea. And like, some of them are like Sly Cooper references. You can shoot entire parts of the environment out of it. I just think it's such an immaculate game. And obviously then you get to the little thematic beats that are in there. Like, the character of Rivet, I think, is awesome. Like, I just love my time with it. And I couldn't find a fault, even though I know exactly what you mean, where it doesn't necessarily have that 5-star tinge. I do think it's a 5-star game.
That's it. I would never even begrudge you thinking that. I think this is a very sort of personal hang up that I have. It's sort of like when I see a joke that I appreciate and I know is funny, but I don't laugh at it. I just kind of say, that's funny. You know, like maybe a bit of a nose exhale rather than something that I don't think about in that way and it hits me and I just burst out laughing. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Laughing at it like I was earlier in this bloody podcast when we were talking about Returnal. That's
which is still in the S tier, by the way.
Absolutely,
what
it is.
What are we doing?
Which is, I think that's like the difference. It's like I appreciate it. I feel at a distance to it at all times, and I never have as much fun with it.
I don't mind.
And I'm happy to concede because that's incredibly personal. It is very well put together. So I'd argue it's not S tier,
right?
But I'm happy with A.
I'll go A tier because I like keeping people happy. But at the same time, we're going to come back around to the list anyway. And I am curious if people do have more faults with Ratchet and Clank. Are they just, it's another one of them? Is it a genre complaint? Was there something more specific to the level design, the unlocks, the pacing, whatever, like something that they didn't nail? Because for me, I just found it to be this perfect thing that I just had so much immediate fun with. Next game down is Destruction AllStars, one of the absolute misfires of the generation. It's not the only absolute misfire.
That's it. It's going to be, I think it's an
easy D.
It's an easy D, I think. That could have been something a little bit special with it being, Sony's, one of its biggest first party forays into live services. It releasing on PlayStation Plus. It should have had this massive install base, but it sucked. It wasn't all that good.
They completely wasted the idea of it. Like, if you played Destruction Derby back in the day, Destruction Derby 2 I thought was better. But if you played those games, you played so many of those vehicular action games, whether it was the Vigilante 8 or Twisted Metal or Destruction Derby or whatever, something like Wreckfest kind of brought that spirit back a few years ago, and I absolutely love Wreckfest. And I always thought Destruction AllStars was going to be this all singing, all dancing first party revival of all those games, car combat games. And then all you have access to is just this really weird physics engine and certain side shunts and stuff, hardly any power-ups unless they're character-based. And it just felt so undercooked. And then on top of that, they had the goal to charge for the single-player story missions. the content packs rather. And I know I'm saying single player story. They're more character packs. You only get one for free, then you got to pay for the other ones. And they even then themselves are still arena fights and stuff. It's just that they're couched in this wider backdrop of like, oh, this is what this character is all about and what they're doing. It was just such a weird way to roll that thing out. And I know initially they wanted to charge full price for it, and then right next to launch they said, oh, actually no, it's going to be on PlayStation Plus, which inadvertently or ironically ended up killing it anyway, because people just went, well, I don't even need to think about this. I can dabble for a second and let it go. And I always hoped they would turn something around. Like, this would be a perfect PlayStation Plus game and a perfect Astro Bot-like reminder of what a PS5 can do, but it just completely failed. It just felt horrible to control.
It reminded me a little bit of what happened with Drive Club. I don't think as a game it's as good as Drive Club, but it had a similar rollout where you almost didn't even know when it was coming out, how it was releasing, like what are we even getting? And then when it finally dropped, everyone was just kind of like, well, you've sort of botched this now. I don't even know if the game is going to be good or worth my time, but I actually don't want to pay it any mind because there's a stink surrounding it. It has shat itself and the stink is coming into my nose. Yeah, I'm happy giving that one a D. I don't think about that. I'm that Mad Men meme where I'm like, I don't think about you at all.
Right, you know? the Thanos thing.
Yeah.
I don't know who you are. I wish it was so much better. Like I said, I love those old school titles. I know Twisted Metal is on its way back, so you would think that at some point we'll get a good vehicular combat game again, but it ain't this. Final Fantasy VII Rebirth, a game that... you take this away.
Thank you.
Yeah, because I was just going to ramble on again.
Well, the thing is about this one, I suppose we won't spend maybe too much on it because we are fresh off, more or less, a huge spoiler cast that we did on the podcast channel a week ago.
Podcast feed, go check out the audio feed, yeah.
Sorry, yeah, which you can find on wherever place you get your podcasts. It was an all right conversation, I thought, that I'm biased because I'm in it. The point is, Final Fantasy VII Rebirth is a game I really liked. I think in many ways it is better than 16, and in just as many ways it is worse than 16. It has a lot of stuff that it does not need. Again, it is way too bloated, but I was able to make a good decision, I think, to ignore most of the proper open world bumf that doesn't really contribute to anything other than leveling up your characters and getting better gear.
You get cutscenes and character stuff, but yeah.
Well, I feel like I did the stuff that
you do as well.
Like rewards you with cutscenes and characters. Like, I didn't ignore it all. I did most of the main side missions, did the artifacts that you're searching for, which again have like cutscenes tied to them. And all of that was fun enough for me. I really enjoyed that until the pacing kind of got, a bit wonky towards the end, and I felt like I should be prioritizing the main missions because it didn't feel right to then go look for someone's chickens. But I think it's maybe the most beautiful game I've ever played. Ooh. There was just occasions, especially watching the cutscenes, where I thought, when you played something on PlayStation 1 back in the day, or PlayStation 2, Metal Gear Solid 2, for instance, and you thought, graphics won't get better than this. I had that same thought a lot while watching the cutscenes, which I think are just brilliantly directed in this game as well. I don't think it's a perfect Final Fantasy game, but I thought it solved a lot of the issues that the original remake had for me that stopped it being something that I want to go back to. I would actually replay Rebirth in a way that I wouldn't replay a remake, because while it does have some similar issues with roadblocks and just some outrageously bad level design. I'm looking at you, the Kate Sith box scoring mission. It's not according to this game, my friend. It does have, it mostly avoids it. And it gave me a spectacular time where I got to hang out with my pals, go to the beach with no shirt on, ride a Segway, and that means as much to me as the big sort of plot-driven stuff.
Sometimes that's all you need. Yeah. I'm very mixed on the new Final Fantasy VII trilogy, which is it's what it's going to be in terms of the way. I loved the direction they were going with remake and the teasers and all that kind of stuff. Spoilers for Final Fantasy VII remake. Obviously, that game is from 2020. We'll not do spoilers for Rebirth, but we will for remake. The way that game ends, where it fractures reality itself, it fractures fate, fractures destiny. The idea that they are addressing the fact that they are a remake within the Final Fantasy VII canon, and what is ahead of them is boundless, terrifying freedom. And oh my God, what can they possibly do to to make this worthwhile going forward. And I just thought Rebirth, I'm entirely talking down the story side, just fell down the stairs over and over and over again. And so I'll not do specifics for that. You can go check out the spoiler cast for that. But I only found it to be this incredibly bloated, just overwrought mess of various plot points, various ideas of plot points that either do a disservice to what's there in the original, try to remix plot points, change the order of things, change what happens to certain characters, things like that. Nothing is remotely satisfying, and by the time you get to the end of it, it just felt like I said, this really overblown, overwritten mess. However, the other side of that is that the gameplay is spectacular in terms of the combat. And the combat system is the best they've ever had. I remember playing FF7 Remake in 2020 and thinking, oh, they finally did it. They've been trying to do a live action Final Fantasy for so long. 15 wasn't really that close. It was a weird feeling game, and they finally got it right here, where you can pause and plan if you want, or you can just go full on Devil May Cry. That's awesome. And they kind of had their own version of that in 16, but they brought it back in Rebirth. I think that's the best thing about it, the combat. But the open world stuff is where it really drags down to me, where I think it's almost this damning indictment on the game that the only way to have a really good experience with it, or the experience that you had, is to avoid a lot of that open world bloat, because it is climbing towers very slowly. It's interacting with rocks and doing the same timing mini game every time, over and over again. Just soul-suckingly bad bloat. Couldn't get away from that at all, and I won't. I thought stuff was just horribly put in. And the only reason I'm putting up with it is because it's Final Fantasy VII. And it felt like Square Enix just testing the limits of how much their fan base will put up with. I'm forever amazed that people think it's a masterpiece. I don't know where you're coming from. If you're analyzing the entire thing and then saying that, I don't know how you could, but fair enough. To me, it gets in its own way every single time, and every single plot beat that it has to nail, it messes up or does a different way or whatever. Shout out to the Dine scene. And so I think, all that said, I'll still say it's a B, because I think it sucks, but I get the way that it's built. I get what they're going for. If they're going for this big overblown thing, they should certainly poured buckets of money into it. And it is this massive 60-hour bloat fest, but that seems to be what they wanted to do, and a lot of people seem to like it.
You know what? I'm happy to concede the B, because while it definitely is an A for me and my experience through it, I didn't have the same problems as you. I think it has way more caveats than 16 when you're recommending it to people, because you do have to say, like, oh, watch out for this, watch out for that. You're going to, run into the Kate Sith box level and you're going to have a bad time. Whereas
you have to push those lumbering dudes.
I like that bit.
What do you mean you like that bit?
I like the bit with I'm really come round to the bit with the chicken as well. I thought that was, I'm a bit of a masochist, you know what I mean? I liked Wanted Dead for it just
that's an actual
life.
Game though.
Yeah, but this, you can just ring the little bell and the chicken comes and it's like, hello little chicken, do you want to come see your gran?
Kill him and eat him.
And then, spoilers for the chicken quest, and then you eat the chicken at the end. I gasped, Scott, after it made me go through all of that to save the chicken. I
cared more about that
chicken sandwich.
I cared more about that chicken dying than anything else in the video game.
I hate this.
Horrible.
Oh man, the music in Final Fantasy VII Rebirth, that song when you're escorting Sam the dog around places, absolutely magical. So many serene moments in there. Oh, it's definitely an A for me, but let's go B. Otherwise, we'll turn this into another spoiler cast.
We'll come back around. I know that there'll be people clawing at the screen wanting it to be an A or potentially an S. Next game down is Foamstars, a thoroughly forgettable game IMO, but I know you played a lot more of it than I did.
Worst game on this list, I think.
Really? Worse than Destruction All-Stars?
I think so. Because, I'll tell you why, the gameplay is better. I actually had a decent time playing Foamstars. It is bright and colourful. It is fun. But I don't think it can get any higher than bottom place, because the monetization in this game is just so aggressive. And even the things that I will praise, the gameplay, the graphics, they're so blatantly inspired by other games that have done this thing better. Like, it's a good feeling version of something you might have already experienced.
Literally Splatoon.
Literally Splatoon. So because of that, and because it charges you an outrageous amount for skins and guff that you're constantly encouraged to look at, and it doesn't really have all that much progression on its own terms without ponying up that money. I just think it's the most aggressively monetized game on this list, and for that, it's a D. If this thing dies, like, it's only Square Enix's own fault by not being more consumer friendly, I think.
It's it always felt like such a naked corporate ploy where it's like, hey, there's a Nintendo exclusive, or 3 of them by this point, Splatoon games. What if we just did that for a different platform? And you can just see the dollars spinning in the eyes going, oh my God, no one's done that before. We'll get all this money. And then just steering so heavily into that. And it's not that the gameplay I do think is better than Destruction All-Stars, literally because it is sticking to the Splatoon formula. But then it does have some new stuff. Like you're literally like driving into players to knock them out when they're dazed or whatever. There's a satisfying enough feeling to that.
There is.
And you get certain power-ups and stuff, but it never gets away from that, just that corporate feeling that a lot of modern games have. Suicide Squad had it, where you can feel test audience data being filtered back in and all the edges being smoothed off, and just how do we make the most palatable thing for a hashtag mainstream audience as possible?
Yeah.
It's one of them. And then that clashes with internally, you can see the gameplay designers doing their best and trying to make it work, but it just never feels like it genuinely has a soul or a reason to exist.
Yeah, like I do agree with you. I do think there is artistry in there. I do think the character designs are very appealing. I think they absolutely nailed that. The aesthetic really works for me. And I do think its primary audience is, kind of like teens and probably kids. But I think I said this when we were talking about it on the podcast, but that almost makes it worse because the monetization is so aggressive, where you're like, okay, you're targeting a younger audience, and then you've got all of this predatory monetization on top of it. That makes me even less likely to cut you any slack. So I wouldn't go as far to say it's as soulless as a lot of games that I've played over the past few years. It definitely has moments that shine from the developers putting real artistry and creativity in it, but it's mostly overshadowed by what you said of box ticking your target audience and trying to get as much money out of that as possible.
Yeah, I think that the actual, the literal monetization amounts reflect that. Like, you've got so many third-party publishers, and obviously some first parties, but so many publishers just trying to get a Fortnite, trying to get a Roblox, trying to get a GTA Online, and just fishing over and over again, trying to get that perfect formula, because they know if only one of those bets hits, it's a huge payday. And you see them trying to remove all the edges and trying to make it as palatable as possible. But I just think that makes things completely soulless. Next game down is Demon's Souls, a game that was fine enough.
Fine enough.
Fine.
Go on. No, you go on with this one. I jumped in on 7 Rebirth, so I'm giving you the floor to air your grievances, perhaps.
I think Demon's Souls, to me, and I played a tiny bit of the original, but the Demon's, going back to this, and then obviously it's completely overhauled for PS5. You could tell that it was a step towards something greater. There's a reason the Souls series didn't blow up until Dark Souls. Like, Demons is fine, and I know people love Demons, and it's not that I don't value what it brought to the table, but to me, it's a refinement step. It's a gateway towards something greater, and Dark Souls was that something greater. Releasing them in this order and going back to the game that predates all that stuff and all the lessons learned for level design, boss design, etc., made this feel like a prototype. And so it's absolutely beautiful. I get it, but again, I couldn't give an S about the graphics at all. I really don't care about something looking pretty if I'm not enjoying playing it. And so it was fine. It was just fine, but there was just so many boss designs where I was like, yep, that's been refined so much more going forward. That's a really basic, boring version of that. And I just got through Demon's Souls. It was fine, but for me, it wasn't anything more than that.
Where would you put it?
Well, again, if it's our joint list, it's probably an A, because I've got to do all the stupid, what are they going for stuff.
You don't have to concede this. I would put it as an A, but if it sounds like you have a bigger problem with it, maybe a C, maybe even a D.
No, it's not a D. For me personally, it would be a C, because it just, like I said, it feels like an old, a step towards something bigger, and like it never really overcame that for me personally. It's not like they went back in and changed anything other than the presentation. Like, fans compared the nav meshes and the literal level layouts, and it's all like almost exactly the same.
Yeah.
And a lot of the AI is quite similar and everything. So, to me, I was just like, yeah, this feels like what a team made in 2009. And back when the Souls games were hated, like there was a whole time when everyone hated this stuff. There was like magazine write-ups about how much they were horrible games. FromSoft don't know what they're doing, whatever, for years. And then Dark Souls came along. And even when Dark Souls first launched in 2011, it didn't actually get its flowers until 2013.
Yeah.
Like, it took a long time for this stuff to click. But I would say for good reason, if a lot of the stuff that's being analyzed is Demon's Souls.
Oh man, I could not disagree more, but of course I could not. Demon's Souls for me, I'm pleased they didn't change too much in terms of like the level layouts and the boss designs and whatnot, because I still do think it is a fantastic game. In terms of the FromSoft library, to me, I love Dark Souls 2, don't get me wrong, and I love Dark Souls 3. I think Demon's Souls is probably above both of those two games.
Oh my god!
For me personally, because yes, it is the origin story. A lot of its elements have been refined, but man, especially with this PS5 remake, going back to it, I still had such a good time. I played this game twice, since it came out. I think the visuals definitely elevate the experience, especially if you're a returning player who doesn't mind that they altered some of the art direction. And that certainly helps, but it is just ultimately the core feel that I really enjoy. I think the level design and the visual style of Demon's Souls, it's of course been reflected in Dark Souls, but it feels at least unique enough to its own world. I like some of the more stranger and obtuse elements, like the really punishing nature of it, halving your health and really driving the knife in every time you die and making things more difficult. I like that stuff. I like the NPC storylines that are in there, and I think it's a really good game, Scott, and I hope Bluepoint are able to make either a Bloodborne remake or maybe even their own Souls game, because I hope they learned a lot from this process. And yeah, I just think Demon's Souls itself is really, really good, and I would push back on it just being like more feeling like a prototype, because I do think it works in and of itself.
Would you want it in the A tier? Because I don't mind at all.
It's in the A tier for me. I don't think
I live to give.
I don't think I could go any lower.
That's fine. Demon's Souls can sit in the A tier. So far, we have nothing in the C tier.
Really?
We're either S, A, B, or D.
Well, that might change with the next one, Scott Silford. We'll see.
We'll see. Next game is Sackboy: A Big Adventure, a game that I was quite underwhelmed by.
Me too.
Considering that I love 3D. I love a big variety of genres, but I have a soft spot for 3D platformers and a soft spot for Little Big Planet. Like that was obviously some wholesome PS3 era memories, and them doing a proper platformer with Sackboy, I thought it would have that level of inventiveness that you were able to get up to in Little Big Planet. And then when you play this, it's just very stock 3D platformer layouts, and you can do it in co-op. It's fun enough. It was a nice enough launch experience, but I never was wowed by the level design. It just felt very, very straightforward, almost like they needed to get something out to try and appeal to multiple audiences. And it's like, we had Astro Bot, I always get it wrong.
Yeah.
The Astro lad. And then we might as well do a Sackboy game alongside, because for the longest time, Sackboy was the PlayStation mascot. So we might as well tick that box for the remaining people who wanted that thing. But it's just so nothing. It's fine. It's like a 5 out of 10, a 6 out of 10. It's fine.
Yeah, I'd probably give it more than a 5 out of 10. I maybe even would give it a 7 out of 10. But like you said, it feels...
Do you prefer this to Astro?
No. Even I wouldn't prefer to Astro. I mean, it's more of a complete game than Astro is, but I wouldn't. This is actually the game that I would recommend Astro over. I'll give you that.
Oh, you'd recommend this over Astro?
No. I'd recommend Astro over this.
Okay,
If you want a platformer on the PlayStation 5, for as short as Astro is, I do think it's a little bit better than Sackboy, which in and of itself is fine. Like you said,
yes.
I think it was okay. It's just when you look at that launch lineup, for me, even compared to other cross-gen releases like a Miles Morales or what have you, I just don't see this for me taking advantage of the new hardware.
No, not at all.
Not at all.
Not even for ray tracing and material effects and things like that. Yeah. I don't even remember any. The haptics were obviously there when you're doing different jumps and activating parts of the levels, but nothing in the same way as Astro.
Yeah.
Like if this is your mascot platformer, it's not showing off the PS5 at all. And obviously it was a cross-gen release. It was on PlayStation 4, but at the same time, the PS5 version didn't have the bells and whistles, didn't have anything that differentiated it.
That's it. That's what I feel like. Obviously, this stuff was in there that made it special to the PlayStation 5, but it definitely feels more so than the other launch games that were similarly cross-gen, like it was a PS4 game that you just went, oh yeah, you know what, get it on there, because like you said, we'll get that younger audience in, we'll get the co-op in there, we'll have some fun, and it's all right. I would never fully knock it. It's definitely not D tier for me, but I can't give it any more than C.
I was going to say, I'd say C tier feels like a good fit for Sackboy's Big Adventure. God of War Ragnarok.
S.
Yeah.
No, speak your truth.
It's aged worse since I finished it. I mean, you did a big spoiler. I don't think it was a video. I think it was a spoiler cast on it. And I think the best parts about this game are the story. I think the amount of repetition there is in terms of the things that are reused from the first game, I said before in regards to Horizon Forbidden West, I think Sony, at least the Jim Ryan era, make boring as hell sequels. And I found God of War Ragnarok the big steps that it takes forward are in story, and then they are in the Lopnir Spear when you finally get that towards nearer the end. But that is like 20 hours in. I hated playing as Atreus. One, because I just didn't want to play as Atreus. I'm playing God of War, I want to play as Kratos. But two, because he just plays like Aloy, like Jin Sakai, like Ellie. He's just another bow person. It's so boring. And the second they take away one of the more identifiable combat models, i.e. God of War / Kratos, and just stick you with Atreus doing his Marvel dialogue, doing this boring gameplay, I hated that stuff. And so I love all the thematics. Give me sad Kratos as much as the next person. I'm probably more than the next person. I love the Chris Judge's performance, all that stuff. However, I think the actual story is a pretty big letdown. The whole thing they let up, they tease in regards to how they're going to solve Ragnarok, what's going to happen with that, can they defy fate, etc. It just feels like who blew the horn, what happened with Jormungandr. They just kind of pivot away from that. And then the fact that Cory Barlog, game director, was even getting out there going, it's a story for another time. And it's like, well, wasn't it the story for now, for the years that you teased this, for like 4 years or whatever? I just thought it was a bit of a mess. The thematics are very rich, and we did a whole hour spoiler cast on it about how incredibly written a lot of these characters are. But the more I think about it, the time since launch, it's soured quite a lot. And I never really think about it. It's not like I don't love it. I love 2018's one. I don't love this at all.
So to me, on the other side of this coin,
yes,
God of War Ragnarok has stood that test of time. I know it's only been out less than 2 years now at this point, but it's one that I loved it at launch, and it gets better the more I think about it. And I'm even I'm getting softer on the criticisms I had about it at launch, because for me, Ragnarok is better than 2018's God of War. I know that might be controversial, but I just think its themes are that much richer. I was shocked coming out of Ragnarok that this level of thematic and emotional storytelling was like in a big AAA game. I've seen it in The Last of Us Part 2, and I've seen it in some other AAA games, but the detail and the depth and the sophistication of analyzing fathers and daughters and cycles of trauma and abuse in some cases, and getting deep into who Kratos is and his struggle and his internal wrangling with himself and who he wants to be and who he views himself as. That was all just pure magic to me. Like, I am, of course, there for the Norse mythology. I'm, of course, there for the bigger storytelling beats of Odin and Thor and what they mean for the realm at large. But ultimately, I go to modern God of War for that sort of deeper character analysis. I want to look at these gods and monsters and have them serve as a reflection on my own everyday life. And the fact that God of War Ragnarok not only achieves that for me, but does it to such an extent, I didn't expect to love it anywhere near as much as I did, because I really like God of War 2018, but I don't have the same fondness for it that you have. I don't think that a lot of others do. I still think it's one of the best PS4 exclusives, but I would have others above it, whereas Ragnarok, the only thing holding it back for me is how condensed the third act is, because it is rushed in places. You know,
the final fight is horrific.
There's that giant magic quote, which I cringed at even when I was playing.
All the corridor, that reducing the Ragnarok to just a corridor with a few arena fights is like, what the hell?
I thought some stylistic choices, like the sort of just really keeping that one-shot ethos and keeping it closed in a Kratos did do the scale of Ragnarok itself a bit of a disservice, especially compared to
so when certain
previous God of War games.
Yeah, certain characters need to be in certain scenes, so they just kind of step in frame like, oh, hey, I've got this thing to tell you, even though you last saw me in a different realm.
100%. Like, I definitely have like little nitpicks like that, but overall as an experience and as an emotional gut punch, and more importantly as well, as something that is just satisfying to play, I'm with you. I think that it is like more of the same in terms of combat. It's iteration rather than a full-on evolution of what 2018's God of War started. But I didn't mind that for this, as this is the second half of that story. So those kind of, that continuity made sense to me. And once I got into the sort of a loop of exploring the world, getting my loot and upgrading Kratos, I personally found that very satisfying. I can see why people might have thought that was a bit boring and a bit repetitive and just slightly iterative over what they had before, but that was like the cherry on top of, for me, this excellently told story that introduced so many interesting characters and had so many either emotional punches or out of nowhere plot twists that I thought, I cannot hate this game. In fact, I think it has that extra X factor compared to the 2018 one.
No, like I said, I definitely prefer 2018's one, but it was like, I agree with everything you just said. Like it's not like it's not an enjoyable adventure the whole way through. I just have so many bugbears when I think back on it. Whereas 2018's I've been through a couple of times, and I think that game is. I love the reframing of Kratos. There's nothing short of a miracle that they've done this for 2 games to take one of the most one-dimensional games, one-dimensional characters in video game history, and then give him all this depth and make all those anger, make that anger into an anger issue and a mental struggle. And it's like that's brilliant. That's genius. They should be given infinite flowers for that. But things like the over tutorialization in Ragnarok, where Atreus is just telling you what to do, things like that, that make it, and some of the writing style, like I'm forgetting the name of Ratatoska, the squirrel dude, that like the little Disney elements that are in there, the mainstream chasing stuff that I don't need in my God of War game, and I don't think they make it feel natural either. I think they're quite jarring, and they use Kratos as a way to make that stuff work. But I think taken all together, like I said, with the Atreus segments, especially when you're in that bit where you're just gathering flowers or whatever it is on the back of that thing for ages. Like I was like, what are we doing? I mean, like, there's like, we'll get there with Spider-Man 2 in terms of what the hell are we doing in regards to certain level design. I see all this, and I do think God of War Ragnarok should probably be an S tier PS5.
You reckon? Are you sure?
It's not personally. It's like a B for me, but I like
a B.
Same as Horizon Forbidden West. Like they're the same for me. They're both like beautiful, but did very little to the gameplay.
I mean, if we're being fair, that should probably make it an A. I think it's the best game on this list. I really do. I really do, over everything that we've talked about so far. Actually, no, not Returnal. Returnal is maybe the very best, and then very slightly below it is God of War Ragnarok.
Let's put it in the S tier for now.
Okay.
Why not?
Thank you very much.
Kena Bridge of Spirits, my friend.
Yeah, come on. This is mostly a you thing, so I know you loved this game.
But I would say this is, I mean, out of this entire selection, I'm just having another look over it. I would say Kena Bridge of Spirits is the most overlooked PS5 game, like by far. And I know that there's a PlayStation 4 version of it. But Kena Bridge of Spirits is nothing less than the best PlayStation platformer since the likes of Jak and Daxter, Jak 2, whatever it is. Just a beautiful, beautiful game. There is a disparity between the cutscenes, the way that it was advertised, the stuff that got, I'm blanking on the name of the devs, but that team were hired because of a Majora's Mask short they came from a Majora's Mask short over on YouTube that looks beautiful. It's a beautifully animated piece. And some of Kena looks like that. Some of that stuff was in the marketing, but then in-game, it can't match up to that level of fidelity. But the way that it plays, the fact that I'm going to be ironic here because I just complained about bow characters.
Amazing.
And Kena is another one of them. However, I do think that the combat wrinkles that are there, the fact that you're sort of putting launchers on enemies to do more damage, and you're then creating your own weak spots and stuff like that, just made it more enjoyable. There's not loads to this. It kind of felt like, because it was a studio, one of a studio's first games, and maybe the start of a franchise, that they would flesh it out into something else. But it's just such a great and beautiful like throwback. Like I said, all the criticisms around this game were, oh God, it's like a PlayStation 2 platformer. And I'm like, good, give me more of them. That's not a negative at all.
Yeah.
Something like Jak and Daxter, the original, with its like semi-open world focus and everything, is a beautiful way to do a platformer. Why not do more of that? But yeah, Kena kind of falls down a bit in its story. It doesn't have as much of a resolution as I think it seems like it's going to have at the start. But the animation is just so beautiful. You can tell that it's from an animation studio. Fleshing all that stuff out as my throat gives up on me. And then you add on layers of combat where you actually do get some surprisingly challenging combat encounters, some of them that are optional. You've got to go find them and stuff. And just a very straightforward, PS2 era platformer with modern combat. I absolutely love it. It's not an S or an A tier. It's a B.
It's not an S or an A tier.
No, I think the story stuff does bring it down, and I think because it just doesn't have as much to it. In terms of the A tiers, if we're putting it, it's not going to be next to Spidey, Miles Morales. It's not going to be next to Astro's Playroom. If those are the two that I would keep in the A tier for me, I would put it in the Bs next to Stellar Blade. It's perfectly next to Stellar Blade and Rise of the Ronin.
Scott,
it's one of those.
Working with you is better than watching telly because I get some of the best plot twists in the entire world doing this job. I was not seeing that coming at all. I thought it would have been at least an A.
I'm the House of the Dragon, baby.
You absolutely are. But it makes a lot of sense from what you said. If it isn't, as good as those other games, fair enough.
It's thoroughly recommendable. I just think that if we're talking about a shared list and a PlayStation consensus, and if we're thinking about it overall, yes, I'm going to champion the things that I love about it, because on a subjective level, I adore Kena Bridge of Spirits. But the story stuff does let it down. Some of the puzzle design, some of it's good. Some of it is just go find this thing somewhere in the area that feels a bit bloaty. And already when you've got a budget that is spread quite thinly across this game, it can feel, or does feel, like you're hyperextending those areas a bit too much. But the promise is there for more. The game didn't sell very well, so I don't necessarily think that's going to happen. But still, absolutely I love my time with it more. It'll be higher on my personal list. In fact, for the absolute lols, I'm giving it an S, mate.
An S?
On my personal list. You can't stop me.
What you mean?
I'll put it in the B's on the shared one, and I'll take it off the S.
I feel like you're making an absolute mockery of the criteria.
You wanted personal lists.
Yeah. I cannot fathom.
I'll put it in the A's. I'll put it in the A's.
All right, I still don't even get that, but it makes more sense to give it an S personally, but a B overall.
Yeah.
You are crazy.
I've got to appease the masses, haven't I?
Not really. No! It's our video! It's our shared list! It's not anyone else's!
You're never going to agree that it's an S or an A, so it's a B.
Would. No, I would happily concede it.
No, it's not. It's not an S or an A, like, overall. I love it a lot.
Silence. Silence in the court. Okay.
Subjectivity.
If you wanted to put this as an S, I have no...
No, it's not.
No arguments against it. If you want to put it as an A, I have no arguments against it. If it to you is an S game, that's what I'm looking for, Scott.
It's a B. It's on our shared thing. It's a B. It's right next to Stellar Blade. But I just love Kena Bridge of Spirits.
This is crazy. I'm gonna have to go with it because we're gonna run out of time at some point. But on the shared thing, which is just again your thoughts, it should be an S, but it's a B.
No, it's not. I did the S for the lols. In terms of how much I love it, I could put it in the A because it's my personal list and it doesn't matter. Yeah. But if it's a shared thing, it's something closer to approaching objectivity, some sort of shared list. It's not just personal opinions. Like, it's a combination of me and you.
Yeah.
So it can't be as high as it would be on my personal list.
But the thing is, yes, the shared list is a combination of you and me.
Yes.
But if I'm not involved in this ranking, then it's just you.
I'm not going that cavalier with it. I can't.
Just you.
No. I've got to be honest. I'm putting it in the B's in the main list. That's where it sits. That makes more sense. That they'll agree with me down in the comments below. But I love Kena Bridge of Spirits and I want to give it its flowers, so I'm putting it in the A.
I am not doing this for anyone to agree with me. This is you don't have to like it, but
that's the way that it goes. Speaking of not agreeing with you, The Last of Us Part 1.
Yes, A. A for me, Jim. I think it's an excellent remake. Absolutely. I think understandably so, it got a lot of flack for its price point, for a lot of people saying we don't need a remake to a 10-year-old game, and I fully agree with those criticisms.
Same.
Did we need The Last of Us Part 1 right now? I don't think so, but it does exist, and reviewing it on its own terms, I think Naughty Dog has done an excellent job in updating the graphical style and making the performances of the actors feel that or visually appear that bit more human and nuanced. Yeah. I really like the additions that they've made to those performances in particular, and it made the game feel fresh to me. I think it's as good as a remake as you can possibly get without completely reimagining everything. I think now, as a companion to The Last of Us Part 2, they have a certain sense of parity in terms of game feel and visual style that I really like. It makes them feel like a Part 1 and a Part 2, and it will never erase the maybe more distinct art style of the original Last of Us on PS3 that you can also play on PlayStation 4. And honestly, the only reason it doesn't get an S from me is that sort of question of did we need this right now? But
that's where I'm coming from.
More importantly, it doesn't get an S because it doesn't have The Last of Us factions in there.
Yeah.
If you're selling this as the definitive version of The Last of Us, do not overlook my boy, The Last of Us factions, especially now you have cancelled the live service Last of Us. If that was the reason, I kind of understood, but the fact that that's not coming now and we don't have an updated way to play that part of the game in this $50, $70 PlayStation 5 remake. I think that's a little bit criminal myself.
Yeah. Full disclosure for me, this was the one where I was like, is this even a PS5 game? And like you were saying, it is remade from the ground up. Like, they have overhauled it. I got nothing out of this. It's one of the things that made me realize I'm sick of The Last of Us. So it's like, but at the same time, That's why I'm putting it as a C on my list.
Okay.
Because it was just The Last of Us again, and as I've said a million times over, especially this video, I couldn't care less about them doing more fidelity with the faces. Didn't change those scenes, didn't do anything for me at all. But that fidelity is there. The graphical quality is there. I guess this is the most definitive version of this. I like the whole part 1 framing, and it does work a bit more easily with part 2 in that regard. I'd kind of defer to you about what you think it is. Like I'm just like, yeah, it's a reskin.
Yeah, I mean, for me, it's on here in a way where we haven't included remasters like The Last of Us Part 2 remastered or the Death Stranding Director's Cut, because it's like, it was one of like the only PS5 exclusives for a while. Like when it launched, we were still in the sort of cross-gen era, which we've included on here, but it felt like, you know, something that was special to PlayStation 5. It was fully remade. I do think that even though it is fundamentally the same game, it is a PS5 release, so I think that's why it should be included on there. And honestly, I do think it is a really good project. Like if you can get it cheaper than the $70 they were charging, or if you never played The Last of Us before, it's kind of like the perfect game for me. I think it's just about who the audience is, and I don't think it's necessarily for people who have already played The Last of Us, if that makes sense.
Oh, no,
like it's not enough, arguably, of an upgrade to make that huge jump. Maybe if you had like a $10 upgrade path, that would absolutely be spot on, but I think this was to capitalize on the television show more than anything else for new players who might own a PlayStation 5 or want a PlayStation 5 and haven't played the original game, and it's like, oh, well, he's the quote-unquote best version of it, and it's full price.
Yeah, well, that's the thing. Like, this is one of the best games of all time. Like, you know, remaking the visuals from the ground up and bringing it more up to where part 2 is a worthwhile endeavor to do. And I do, obviously, there are the PS5 things in there, like the haptics, like that changes the way, to a degree, bits of the combat feel. It didn't do a whole lot for me, which is why I'm knocking it down a bit. But it's that thing of like, it's so close to the original, and that is one of the best games of all time, that I'm like, is this not just a default S in that case?
Well, that's the question. I don't think so, just because it doesn't have the multiplayer element. If it did, and it was that complete definitive edition, I would absolutely say it's an S, because they will have remade everything about that original game in the highest quality possible. But if we're factoring in sort of business decisions and context, like we kind of did with Foamstars, I can't quite get over that there could one day be an even more definitive remake that includes everything that was in the original on top of the bells and whistles they've added here. So I know people might say, well, people don't remember The Last of Us 1 for the multiplayer suite, and of course they don't. The thing that people remember is the story, which is faithfully here in its original form, script-wise and whatnot, but I just feel like it's a shame to ignore the hard work and great quality that was put into that multiplayer suite that is now just has been forgotten to time.
Yeah,
it's not even classed as part of the Last of Us franchise anymore.
It's really not. Would you say A then?
I'd go A for me personally, but I'm happy with a B, because that would split the difference between you and I.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Last of Us Part 1 is a B tier game.
That is ruinous to me personally.
We'll go A. We'll go A.
Yeah.
I like the idea of the comments kind of deciding what you guys think in regards to how much it is a PlayStation 5 game and whether the improvements may distinguish it enough, etc. Final game is Spider-Man 2, and I say game because there are various parts in there that I did not enjoy playing. It was a bad game to play.
But it was a great game to play.
Exploring a construction site, pedaling a bike. What are we doing, Sony?
I will bat for that bike scene. Like, I will go to bat for it every single time. The construction scene, maybe not. Some of the other walking scenes, maybe not. The bike scene and the Ferris wheel scene and the amusement scene, those are integral parts of this experience for me personally. That bike scene and the high school scene afterwards made me care about Harry Osborn. Like, without that sequence, I wouldn't give a crap about Harry.
There's a million ways they could have done it.
Well, there's a million ways they could have done it, but they didn't. And this worked for me, you know what I mean? Like, I don't think you can just rely on the fact that Peter knows Harry, and Harry was mentioned in the original game. I think I worried that relationship was going to play out like the Prowler in Miles Morales, where I just kind of thought, well, you're expecting me to care because they're related and it's a tragedy, but I've seen this so many times. As a huge Spider-Man fan, I've seen the dynamic between Harry and Peter explored in so many different ways.
True.
And I was kind of cynical coming into this game because I thought, do I need that? What can they add to that relationship that I've never seen before? And it's not like this is a total overhaul, but just the quality of the performances and the strength of those sequences actually made me care about Harry Osborn. Like, I honestly thought initially when it first started, I turned to my partner and said, I can't believe they've done such a good job of making me care about this idiot. He's so charismatic and likable. I thought, you've nailed it, and you need the stuff like the walking sections for that. For me personally, however, there are sections that I do think weren't necessarily that important to the overall narrative or gameplay experience.
No, I think the way that they advertised it, the scenes that seemed like they were in there, like Spidey and Miles chasing Venom across the city, which just doesn't happen in the game, are missed. Like, there are bits that feel pacing beats where it feels like things were specifically removed so they could still hit the deadline, which Brian Intihar, creative director, has kind of touched on, the fact that they did have these different deadlines to hit, or the reality of turning the production around, just because of how much Sony have doubled down on being a Spider-Man studio, whether that's in the movies or in the video game space. And I just thought that was very noticeable. I love the swinging. I love the traversal, like the level of production quality is here. However, I think some characters' faces look ridiculous in spots. I don't think they're not all animated to the same level. And that does stand out. Then there's the stuff where you've kind of got what is ultimately the Last of Us influence, that idea of the walk and talk segments. How do we make them work? How much of that is a PlayStation associated thing? So we've got to have a few things in there. And like you said, there's the theme park stuff where you're doing little mini games and whatever. I think at this point it's quite rote to do that stuff, where it's just like, we're going to just replicate throwing coconuts at the obstacle bottle thing because you're at the theme park, and don't you care about the characters? And I'm like, nah, not really. This is an 11-year-old at this point thing. And I thought that stuff got in the way. I'm buying a Spider-Man game to play as Spider-Man, and I don't mind playing as other characters, but then when you do stuff like the MJ segments that were so boring in terms of just Stealth 101 from 2005,
yes,
and that really was noticeable. That was when it felt like, again, the Last of Us influence was there, where you're exploring this dilapidated, apocalyptic-looking environment, going up against hunters and raiders, so you could tick the Sony first-party box. It just felt a bit muddled overall, and I think the focus isn't there with Spidey 2 like it is for something like Miles Morales. So I also think that the content, like I said, there's things stripped out in the story where it feels like there is things like not having enough things to do in the city. Like, this is a very easy and fast platinum, and I like the idea of that overall. I like the idea of being able to put your stamp on a game for a change, or like more easily be able to do that. But I did find myself wanting more. Like, I was like, I'd cleared out the 5 or 6 hunter blinds that there were, and I just wanted more excuses to use this great combat system, and it just wasn't there. And then there's also the argument that a lot of the open world stuff that you're doing to even get to those combat encounters is repetitive. It's like Final Fantasy VII Rebirth. It's like, we've got 5 things for you to do. You will do each of them 5 times, and then it wore very thin. And I think it wasn't offset by meatier story segments or story gameplay segments, because the main path was just, like I said, so rote and played out and quite boring in quite a lot of spots. IMO.
The thing with not the amazing Spider-Man 2, that is an absolute trash fire of a game. And the thing with Marvel's Spider-Man 2 is I have a lot of criticisms with it, ones that are slightly different to yours, admittedly, but my heart is still saying it's a low S because of the great time I had with it and for how much I did enjoy the story. And with side missions in particular need to be revamped for the next game. We cannot be doing those boring ass B missions where you're doing an AR-B shooting game or whatever.
Chase the drone.
Drone, that stuff is fine as activities, but as your core side content, I think it needs to be more robust and more interesting. I do think the payoff to those side missions is ultimately worth it, but I want more excuses to just be Spider-Man in that world in a way that doesn't just feel like I'm ticking boxes or kind of solving crimes in the same way that I've solved crimes a million times before in Spider-Man games throughout my entire life from Spider-Man 2 onwards.
Or just with vision modes and all the whole the whole idea that modern Spider-Man is just a mini Iron Man. It's going down that route. I wanted way more excuses to use that awesome traversal system. The fact that you have to go in the options and make it so you can actually swing properly. and then actually deal with that physics system. Like, way more excuses to do that. There's one trophy where you have to get from one part of the map to the other without touching the ground. Stuff like that. Like, just, give me reasons to explore this traversal system.
So traversal, I thought, was the best thing in the world, Scott.
No, it is, but they don't do anything with it.
For me, they use it enough in that side content, in the unlockables and the collectibles you can find. I would also like more of it, but the additions they've added, the speed of it this time around, and the web wings, being able to just like kind of fly around the city almost and have to, balance your momentum and try to find height and get under like those chimneys that push you up into the air, combined with like the animations that make it feel sort of dangerous while they're doing it. I like that element. I think you said before that you don't come to a Spider-Man game to play as other characters. And while I see that, I do come to a Spider-Man game to play as Peter Parker. To me, like, Peter Parker is essential to telling compelling stories in a Spider-Man world. I need personally to see his home life. I need to see a lot of that. Yeah. And if you don't want to just do it through cutscenes, I'm happy taking control of him and trying to being him as a person as much as I am as a superhero. I get that's not going to be for everyone, but to me that gives the character a different flavor to a lot of other superheroes and superhero games on the market. It makes you feel that like sort of double life and the hardship that comes with trying to be a person while also trying to be a hero. And that's central to Spider-Man's character for me. The amount his superheroing gets in the way of him building a career or building relationships or anything like that. So that works for me here. I do think the MJ sections, I didn't like them in the first game, and I soured on them even more in the years since. But here, I thought they were all right. I think the first one with Kraven is not great, but once you get a gun, I really enjoyed it after that. And I think narratively they make more sense, especially that scene with MJ and Peter in the black suit, which I think is one of the highlights of the game. Yeah.
Best thing of the whole game.
And I think losing the other segments, if that meant you would lose that as well, I think that just makes the other ones worth it to me. The narrative itself, again, I have a lot of complaints about. I think it's too rushed. I think they could have done this story over 2 games, or honestly omitted Kraven the Hunter entirely.
So
and just
predictable as well.
Absolutely. And focused on other characters and other plot threads. That said, I said this at the time, but I watched this cool review of the game by, I think, a channel called High Top Films, who I essentially share the exact same thoughts of. And they say in that video that, the story should have taken more time to explore these different threads, both across Peter's story and Miles's story. You could have just focused in on one of those and had a great game. But that's not to say that the scenes that aren't there aren't great. I do think there could have been more than them, but the payoffs to stuff like Miles and Mr. Negative or the black suit, I think they're all good. They just could have had time to breathe more. It's a weird thing because the highs to me in this game are high.
Yes.
The highs could have been more consistent, I think.
Totally. I mean, I guess, for me, I don't think what's there is that good. It's like, I think a lot of the plot beats feel really rushed, like Peter's descent into like being more evil. It's almost like a coin flip. Like the Venom Harry stuff is incredibly predictable. And then like him getting so annoyed with Peter or whatever, all that stuff just felt very, very rushed. There's even like specific like kind of plot holes towards the end where like you've got Norman Osborn being annoyed, like saying to Peter / Spidey, hey, what did you do? I can't believe you let this happen, even though he watched the Venom stuff happen. And it's like, and it's like things like that just feel very inconsistent, like in terms of, like I said, to me, the assumption that things were taken out and the corners that had to then be cut or driven over to try and bring this game together for the launch day. And then I do think it's a victim of Sony's wider push for just Spidey media overall. I think the push for constant Spider-Man stuff is getting a bit exhausting. And I think like in here, you've got like a multiverse Easter egg where you just look through a portal into a multiverse, which doesn't feel like it belongs here, like with the tone of the original. And same with things like when you're chasing Black Cat in this one and you just randomly go to like Egypt or whatever it was for a bit. Just like, things like that where I'm like, in Spidey 1, it felt way more consistent. And then in this one, it's like, we've got all these opportunities for all this wider media. So we're going to do all this stuff all at once. And I just felt like it was just this stretched too thin kind of thing. It didn't have the meat and the character of Spidey 1.
Damn.
I say all that.
That Black Cat chase is one of my highlights. I love that Black Cat section, yeah.
Where would you, you'd say a low S?
Honestly, for me, I think it would get a personal low S because, yes, I have my issues. Yes, it is inconsistent, but those highs and those moments it provided me are so high that I couldn't, for me, put it in the same bracket as something like Horizon Forbidden West, which never reached any of those highs and was probably just as inconsistent.
Oh, God. For me, it's like a B or a C. But I don't mind knocking it up. I mean, the thing is, if you think about like a set of PlayStation 5 games, what are S-tier PlayStation 5 games? For about 2/3 of it, Spidey 2 is.
Yeah.
Like, you've got those really turgid elements of game design and the things that a lot of us are quite sick of doing in an open world space or in terms of the pacing or whatever. But you do have the best traversal system in gaming history. Like, you do have all these things that do make you feel like Spider-Man, IGN. And so I do think that, like, I can, that's fine for the split list. Like, I don't mind going S tier for that. I've got him in the C for my personal one.
I think S is too high for the joint. If it's me and you, I've had my way so much. I would give it an S for the joint list and my personal list. But if I'm giving it an S and you're giving it a C, I don't think it's fair to average that out as an S. I don't think that is.
There's never a maths to this. I don't mind because it's like I don't rate Spidey 2. I haven't made a video of it, but I did a whole article about how it's a huge disappointment.
Absolutely, but this is the point of a joint list, my friend. We got to get in the middle somewhere. So if you're going C and I'm going S. I mean, I'd still argue for an A. I wouldn't argue for a B.
That puts it next to Spidey Miles Morales and my beloved Astro's Playroom.
Yeah, you know what? I can live with that.
That gets us through.
It's because for me, I would have to go to bat for it being better than Miles Morales. So if that ended up in the B tier and Miles was in the A, I think we would have to go to war.
I mean, that is factually correct. So
what do you guys think?
I haven't had a point here. I was debating before because we've done an hour and 40.
Yeah.
And I was debating split. And we can still record this now, but I was debating splitting it into a part 1 and part 2.
Right.
Because we're about to go back through the whole thing.
Yeah.
And then put them in order, unless it's already close to the order we would have.
I think so. I think it is relatively close. Yeah, I'll just double check. Wilbon's definitely not in, is he? He wasn't.
No, he wasn't before. I think we were the whole afternoon.
Yeah, he's not.
It'll be a 2-hour extravaganza.
Beautiful. Yeah, I don't think there'll be much deliberation, to be fair.
I don't think so. I'll do this so that there's arms to look for. Hello. And then we can go into it. So that's all the games for now. Let's go in reverse tier order so that we eventually arrive at the greatest PlayStation 5 game, whatever the number 1 is of the S tier. But let's rank individual tiers. The D tier, as it stands, is Forspoken, Solace, Destruction, AllStars, and Foamstars in that order. Forspoken being the best of the D tier.
I think that makes sense.
I would put Destruction All-Stars below Foamstars because I don't think there's a redeeming quality to Destruction All-Stars. I think the gameplay sucks and the monetization sucks and the characters suck. And it was such a missed opportunity. At least in Foamstars, when you knock someone out, it's like, that felt pretty good.
Yeah.
I'm talking about modicums of brain activity here.
I'll defer to you. Foamstars, I did at least enjoy for a few rounds. I will definitely give it that. And it looks very pretty. You've convinced me. I'm happy with that not being dead last.
The only C tier game we have is Sackboy: A Big Adventure, so fair enough.
Yeah, it works for me. Definitely not a D, but I wouldn't put it alongside the likes of Rise of Ronin or Stellar Blade or anything like that. Not for me.
And then in reverse order for the Bs, Kena Bridge of Spirits, Final Fantasy VII Rebirth, Gran Turismo 7, Rise of the Ronin, and Stellar Blade.
Damn, this is actually hard to internally rank. I don't know what you think of this.
I would keep Stellar Blade at the top. I personally would have Kena above Rebirth because I think of just how much Rebirth just poops all over its story potential. But that's me speaking as an angry Final Fantasy fan.
I think I'd put Final Fantasy VII Rebirth at the top.
I knew you were going to say
at the top of the tier. I really would. It's because I had it in A for mine, but I think for me it's better than all those games. It's not as consistent as all those games. But I'm going on the highs, and the highs are better than those for me.
Can I get Kena Bridge of Spirits above Gran Turismo 7?
You know what? You can, because I still think it's crazy that you gave it S personally, then knocked it to B.
I knocked it back down. I regained my sanity, even though it's an S tier video game. And one of the best platformers they've ever made. Rise of the Ronin above Kena. Is that what we're saying to the people at this time?
You know what? Because I'm a lovely guy. Do you want to put Kena at the very top of that?
You know what?
I feel like you got to. It's S for you. It's got to be.
No, it's not. I knocked it down.
Sorry.
Kena on my list is an A.
Well, still, there you go.
It's pretty high. But
did you have any of the others as an A?
No, I did not.
I reckon Go on. I'll go on.
No.
Go on. I've had my way so many times.
No, it's fine. It's genuinely fine. I don't want the torches and pitchforks. Rise of the Ronin, I'm sure when it comes to an overall consensus, is going to be higher. I love Kana, but I don't need to fight for it that much.
I love you all. I do. I love everyone who takes the time to comment in this video, who agrees with us or disagrees with us. It brings me nothing but joy. Do not care about the torches and the pitchforks.
No, I'm just saying, I know to my heart that there's more to Rise of the Ronin. I bounced the F off it and it wasn't for me, but I know my gut, I know that needs to be higher than Kana.
The way you love
I love Kana, though.
The way you love it. I don't love Rise of the Ronin enough to argue that I should be above Kana.
Okay.
So if you think that positively on it, and I feel like I'm trying to make you change your entire personality, but I feel like you love that game.
Well, look, we're living in a mad world anyway, Gears of War trailer, because Final Fantasy VII Rebirth's at the top of the B tier, and that shouldn't even be in the B tier, so what are you supposed to do about that?
Well, would you like Kana to be the top of the B tier is what I'm asking?
No.
Are you sure?
No. I mean, no.
Why not?
Why
not?
doesn't make sense.
Why?
Because Stellar Blade's better than Kana.
Do you think that, though?
Yeah.
I don't think you do, man. The way you talked about Stellar Blade in this podcast and previously on other podcasts,
Yeah.
I just don't buy it. I don't buy it.
It's not the thing that I'm approximating. If this is behind the scenes, when we started deciding to do this, we were only going to have one shared list. So we would do this until we could agree on one shared thing. And then we thought, why not have our personal lists as a separate thing so that we can, in my case, give a dagger to Returnal by putting it in a D tier. But this clashes with the whole thing because the whole shared thing is meant to approximate something close to more objective. The idea that the quality of the game supersedes our opinions. It's a combination, but still.
It is for you. I feel like we failed. We failed you guys. We didn't come to a consensus on what this shared document is because for me, it was entirely just splitting the difference between where we would rank them rather than have some kind of strange other criteria.
I like criteria. I love Kana Bridge of Spirits, but it's not better as a package than Stellar Blade or Final Fantasy VII. It is better than Rebirth, god damn it, but it's not better than Stellar Blade. That's because I hate Rebirth, though. They're different things. They're just different things. There's the personal tier list thing.
Yeah.
It's just different. Kata's going to be something I love. It's not a better video game on that level than these other ones.
That is crazy.
You are
crazy.
We once did, and people can go check it out for more of this insanity. We once did a whole podcast on subjectivity, objectivity.
We did.
Yeah. In critique.
And
it's a whole thing.
You have it you have that war in your brain every day, especially when we do this.
I'm fine. I'm completely clear. You coming in going, hey, maybe you needed to be over here. That's what throws me off. I could explain the reasoning over and over again. I love Kana, but it's not better than those other games.
It's this said anyway, I think Rise of the Ronin is better than Stellar Blade. I think it should be higher than it. Just a little bit.
I tell you what, that probably does make more sense in the end. So then you've got, that's a nice little ranking. So reverse order, Gran Turismo 7, Kana Bridge of Spirits, Stellar Blade, Rise of the Ronin, Final Fantasy VII Rebirth.
Yeah, happy with that?
No, not at all, but it's fine. We can go to A tier.
Are you sure?
Yeah, Rebirth's not even in the B tier to me, so whatever.
Let's lock that in. Are you sure you don't want to put Kana higher? I know I'm belaboring this point.
No. If my subjectivity would override the shared list's attempt at objectivity or whatever the hell we're calling the middle list, Rebirth wouldn't even be in there because I think that game sucks.
Yes, but that's what we should be arguing about right now.
Well, that's what we would be arguing about if we only had one tier. We haven't got that anymore. It's a separate list. Rebirth for me, where have I got it? I've got Rebirth in the D.
Yeah.
And I'm never going to convince you that it's a D game. What's the point?
You're not, but we can at least then wrangle and come to compromise where it lands in the Bs.
Well, I guess then it would land in the Cs because I've got it in D, you got it in B, I'd have it in C.
A low B?
There's just a thing as a low B.
On the bottom of the B. We'll go now. Bottom of the Bs.
That means Rise of the Ronin is the best of the Bs.
That works for me.
What if we put, wait a minute, if Rebirth was at the bottom of the Bs but still above Gran Turismo 7?
That would work for me.
Okay.
That would work for me.
I'll take
that. That would work for me. That would work for me.
Compromise. We should also say that we've been in this room for almost 2 hours and it's very warm.
It's so warm.
It's we seem to cook ourselves in this. The A tier, the biggest tier, in reverse order, Final Fantasy XVI, Demon's Souls, Ratchet and Clank Rift Apart, Pacific Drive, Last of Us Part 1, Astro's Playroom, Spider-Man 2, Spider-Man Miles Morales, and Horizon Forbidden West.
You're not going to like this.
Well, I'm probably not.
I think Spider-Man deserves the top. The very top.
Miles Morales, yeah, I agree, yeah.
No.
If you think Spider-Man 2 is the best of all those video games?
Yes, without a doubt. Yeah, without a doubt. All of those other games I have more potent issues with than I do Spider-Man 2.
I mean, it plays well. Oh, the thing is, it's like the difference between Spider-Man 2 and Horizon Forbidden West is like, hey, which tone of beige did you enjoy more?
Get out of here.
So whatever. And then Last of Us Part 1, blah, blah, blah. I can go with Spidey 2 being the top of the A tier because I'm never going to convince you that it's Astro's Playroom. And even then, Astro's Playroom's in the wrong tier because it should be in the S's, but what can you do?
You're not like, unfortunately not. But, man, I mean...
Spidey 2 is the new number 1. Horizon Forbidden West is above Miles Morales.
No, definitely not. Horizon Forbidden West is, like I said, it was A-, so for me, that's right down the bottom.
The worst of the A tier.
For me, it's better than Rift Apart, but I know I'm not going to convince you on that. So put it last.
No, hold on. You did you combed the map more than I did in Forbidden West.
Yes.
So it's like you can speak more to the overall level of quality that's there. So to me, I don't mind if you're saying like, oh, the overall bar of quality is higher and there's more game there versus Rift Apart, which is quite a straightforward game, even though I did comb that thing.
It's straightforward, but you combed it, you gave it an S. I think it deserves to be higher on our joint list. Just split the difference.
At the minute, Final Fantasy 16 is the bottom one.
No, I don't think so.
What's the bottom out of that?
I think the bottom could be, well, for me, it would be Ratchet and Clank, but Horizon, I'd be fine at the bottom.
Whew. What if we just
I don't think that's bad. It is, isn't it?
What if we
the Bs are great, you know?
What if we did that? What if we grab both of them and then move them around so that you've got... So the bottom is Horizon, but then it's Horizon, Ratchet, Final Fantasy 16. Final Fantasy 16, then Demon's Souls.
Final Fantasy 16 is higher than that.
Yeah, buddy.
I think it's higher than Astro's. I think it's...
I'd have it after Spidey 2, personally.
I'd have it after Miles Morales. No? You love Final Fantasy 16,
I love all that stuff. 16's huge, though. Like, Miles Morales is great, but it's over so fast. And then,
oh, sorry. No. I meant I'd have it over Miles Morales. I'd have it second.
I love that.
I think it's a better...
I'll take
overall,
that. I'll take that.
More interesting game.
Miles Morales then, so in reverse order, unless we're changing, Horizon Forbidden West, Ratchet, Demon's Souls, Pacific Drive, Last of Us, Astro's Playroom, Miles Morales, Final Fantasy 16, Spider-Man 2.
I think I'm all right with that. And maybe put Demon's Souls above Pacific Drive.
Yeah,
I would. I think it's a more complete package.
The middle of the tier battle of the reskins between Last of Us Part 1 and Demon's Souls.
Get out of here.
Get out of here. And then we come to the S tier. There are only 3 games made it to the S tier. God of War, Ragnarok, Returnal, and Helldivers 2. That's in a pretty nice order, I would say, right there.
No chance. I cannot... Right, okay, this is where we're going to have to proper dig deep. I cannot make you accept Returnal as the best game, even though it would be for me. Do you reckon we can compromise on God of War Ragnarok as the top, or would you hate that as well?
No, I wouldn't hate it.
And more importantly, is there anything from A, B, or C that you think deserves to be an S?
Yeah, Astro's Playroom, but we're not
going through it all.
We're not doing that. Even though Astro's Playroom is the number 1, but what can you do?
Go on, hang on, go on. You've compromised on 2 of mine.
This isn't just okay.
You've compromised on 2 of mine. I've got Returnal and God of War Ragnarok in there by brute strength. If you pick one of your S tiers and put it in the S tier, you deserve it.
One of my A tiers, you mean?
No, whatever the hell you want.
And bring anything up?
Whatever the hell you think is S tier, bring it up. Go on. And then we get 2 each.
Oh, God. Well, in that case, yeah, damn it, I'm planting the feet. I'm saying Astro's Playroom is an S tier PS5 game. So, lol for that. Fight down in the comments. You know I'm right. So, yeah, eat that, mate. In terms of actually ranking it, though.
Yeah.
I mean, I would put Returnal at the bottom of those 4. So, lol. So, it's up to you.
I'd have Astros at the bottom, of course I would.
That's fine. That is fine.
How about? Let me hit you with this one.
Yes. I was going to say there's more to say about God of War Ragnarok. I might be totally fine with that just being number 1.
Number 1.
Yes.
God of War Ragnarok.
Yep.
Number 2.
Yep.
Helldivers 2. Number 3. Returnal.
Are you not taking too many knives there, though?
No, because I'm making your beloved Astro's Playroom, which you would put top last. No, so I feel like that's quite a big knife. That's a machete knife. That's a samurai sword knife.
You're hanging in half. Whereas you're still alive.
If it was me, and we've alternated quite nicely here because I would have Returnal, God of War Ragnarok, Helldivers 2, Astros, but then I'm getting my way. And if you think Astros should be at the top,
I'm fine Astros being at the bottom. I just think it's an immaculately made set of levels, set of mechanics, gameplay systems, etc. However, Returnal, I think, should be number 2.
Do you reckon?
I might even say Returnal should be number 1. It's not for me. I get that it's this intricate clockwork mechanism of gameplay ideas. I just think that its own checkpointing gets in the way of its vision. I think that it's become so thoroughly, genuinely off-putting by the end that it's you have to summon a will of human resilience to get through the thing. And then some of the combat's a bit broken anyway, but that's just my experience with it.
Would the addition of, because you can checkpoint it now, you can pause the game and you can save it mid-run now. Does that change anything for you?
That makes me wish...
I know a lot of people wish. I don't like that, actually. What? I like that it's there for people who don't have the time, but for me, I was the purist who was doing those 45-minute runs, but they did patch that in after some feedback, so that is there now. That is the version of the game that we would be putting top.
That's like...
second, sorry.
Coming out of prison and just being like, actually, we had security cam footage that proved you never did it, and you didn't need to go through any of that. Are you happy about it? And it's like, no, I was in prison, mate. No, I had a horrible time. What? They added checkpoints to it.
You could do not checkpoints, so it's
but anything at all. If they've touched it,
it wasn't proper checkpoints. It wasn't like you could just checkpoint here and then you would restart there. It's if you had to give up a run and like go to bed, or you just wanted to bank it and you didn't want to keep going, you could save mid-run. Was the crack?
That's a bit better. I mean, still,
so it's not like checkpoints. It's not going to solve your whole life.
Well, it done something to help. I mean, I guess that doesn't get around the fact that if you die, you go back to the start.
No,
which is the thing that I still hated about it. No, I mean, look. We're purists. We're citizens of the game. I think that there is a case to be made that Returnal is the best PlayStation 5 game available right now on trend. Now we have our personal lists. You can see our personal choices. Returnal, I think, for me, is still in the D tier because I hate that thing.
Here's the thing, though.
But I'm fine with that.
Here's the thing. I'm starting to question it myself. Because I'm looking at God of War Ragnarok and it's kind of screaming out. It's number 1 for me.
It wouldn't even be in my S tier, so... God of War Ragnarok is...
Neither would Returnal. But Returnal's in your D.
Well, exactly. How damning is it that the best PlayStation 5 game is a PlayStation 4 game?
Not very, I don't think. Not very for me. I know what you mean. I know what you're getting at. It would make more sense to have a pure PS5 game right at the very top, but... We played Ragnarok on PS5. I think it's the best experience on PS5.
It is an absolute powerhouse.
Yeah.
I'm fine with Ragnarok taking number 1. I would give you Returnal if you would like it at number 1, because I get the argument for it. And then Helldivers is absolutely immaculate. It's hard to sort of grade live service stuff because it's so fluctuates every few weeks. But every time I check in on that game, it's still going so strong. I think the only remote criticism of that game, which is just stupid criticism, is that there are not more ways to buy different things in it.
Right.
Like the economy, the actual things that they're offering you, the items that they're offering you, the skins, the customization elements are very thin and not badly designed, but quite plainly designed. And you can earn all the premium currency in the game anyway, but that's like one of the only things I've seen people pointing to as a criticism is I'd like to buy cooler stuff.
Yeah.
But that's it. Like in terms of a gameplay forward, modern video game that knows its audience and is playing to it and is just so on it with all the updates. I love Helldivers too. That thing is perfect. Yeah, man, it's between Ragnarok and Returnal.
I'm happy with Ragnarok, but I'm happy to also put... I mean, I win either way. You know what I mean? I win either way, so...
I won because Astro's Playroom is in the S tier, as it justly deserves. The best PlayStation 5 game is God of War Ragnarok, one of the finest, most divisive video games of the last few years. And please go check out the big spoilercast me and Josh did where we break down all of our various thoughts, having finished the game. A couple of years ago, we went for about an hour breaking everything down. Hope you've enjoyed this. Let us know what you think down in the comments below. We will rank anything, goddammit. It's fun to talk about it, especially in this increasingly boiling hot room. So in the future, in the next few weeks, we'll have a Resident Evil ranking coming soon, which Josh is part of alongside Sai. And there's also a Final Fantasy ranking already out there that me and Sai put together. But just let's what else can we rank? You let us know. I hope you enjoyed the video and we'll catch you soon.
Thank you if you've stayed to the end.